Look closely at the eyes staring back at you from ancient Egyptian art. That dramatic, dark liner isn't just a fashion statement frozen in time. It's a whisper from a civilization that saw the cosmos in a grain of sand and wove together science, spirituality, and survival into everything they touched. What if this famous look was more than just beauty? What profound secrets of chemistry, magic, and earthly power are actually hidden within these iconic cosmetics? We often admire it for its striking elegance, but the true story of Egyptian eye Kohl is a journey into a world where every ingredient had a purpose, and every application was an act of profound intention. This was a substance that sat at the crossroads of the pharmacy and the temple, the battlefield and the burial chamber. It was believed to be a gift from the gods themselves, a powerful tool for protection, health, and connection to the divine. Today, we are going on an adventure to uncover exactly how the Egyptians created and used their legendary eye Kohl. We'll explore the sophisticated chemical processes they mastered thousands of years before modern science, transforming raw, earthly minerals into a substance that defined an era. We'll decode the symbolic language behind those iconic almond-shaped eyes, understanding why this practice was so deeply woven into the fabric of daily life, from the lowest laborer to the pharaoh on his golden throne. This is a story of human ingenuity that challenges our very perception of ancient technology. It's about a people who looked at the harsh desert sun and the threat of infection and responded not just with practicality, but with artistry and profound spiritual belief. So prepare to see those famous eyes in a completely new light. We are about to pull back the curtain on one of history's most captivating mysteries, tracing the path from the mines where rare minerals were sourced to the intricate palettes and applicators found in tombs. You will discover how a simple pot of black powder held the keys to warding off evil spirits, preventing disease, and ensuring one's place in the afterlife. This exploration is more than a history lesson. It is an invitation to witness the brilliant, multi-layered world of ancient Egypt, a civilization whose innovations continue to astonish us. Join me as we decipher the hidden code of Kohl and reveal the astonishing truths behind a look that truly transcended time. To understand why this iconic substance was so central to their world, we must first look beyond our modern idea of makeup. For the ancient Egyptians, adorning the eyes was a sacred act, a direct interface with the divine. The stark, almond-shaped outline created by Kohl was a deliberate echo of the Eye of Horus, one of the most potent symbols in their entire spiritual landscape. This was not an attempt to simply mimic a god's appearance, it was a way of invoking his active power and protection. Horus, the sky god, lost his eye in a legendary battle, only to have it magically restored. This act of healing and restoration transformed the symbol into an all-powerful emblem of wholeness, protection, and royal power. By painting this sacred shape around their own eyes, individuals were essentially wearing a permanent, functioning amulet. They were drawing a protective barrier between themselves and the unseen dangers of the world, most notably the evil eye, a malevolent force or envious glare believed to cause misfortune, illness, or even death. The dark, prominent line was a shield, deflecting negative energy and ensuring the wearer's spiritual integrity. This connection extended upwards to the highest levels of the cosmos, directly to the sun god Ra. His divine power was manifest in the sun itself, a brilliant, life-giving orb in the sky, but the Egyptians understood that with great light comes a harsh glare, and they saw the coal-lined eyes of their gods as a practical and symbolic solution. The dark pigment was thought to reduce the sun's blinding glare, allowing Ra to see everything with perfect clarity. When a pharaoh or a priest applied Kohl, they were not just protecting their own vision from the desert sun, they were aligning themselves with the perceptive power of Ra, claiming his ability to see the full truth, to perceive hidden dangers, and to rule with divine insight. This transformed a daily grooming ritual into an act of cosmic participation. You weren't just putting on makeup, you were stepping into your role within a divinely ordered universe, sharpening your sight both physically and spiritually. The importance of Kohl rippled through every layer of society, making it a powerful marker of identity. Archaeological evidence shows that everyone from the lowest farmer toiling in the fields to the queen seated on a golden throne used some form of eye paint. For the common people, its function was intensely practical, a defense against the bright sun, dust, and flies that could carry eye infections. The very minerals used, as we will explore, had antibacterial properties, making Kohl a form of ancient, preventative medicine. But for the elite, it was also a bold statement of wealth, status, and proximity to the gods. Elaborate cosmetic kits made from ivory, ebony, or alabaster, complete with tiny spoons and mirrors, were prized possessions. The quality of the Kohl itself could vary, with the finest, deepest black pigments being reserved for royalty and the priesthood. This widespread use created a unifying cultural thread. Whether for survival or sanctity, the act of applying Kohl was a shared experience that connected every Egyptian to a common set of beliefs and a shared understanding of their place in the world. Finally, its role did not end with death. Kohl jars, applicators, and palettes are among the most common grave goods found in tombs, placed there to ensure the deceased's protection and clear vision in the afterlife. The perilous journey through the underworld required one to see clearly, to recognize gods and demons, and to navigate otherworldly landscapes. A supply of Kohl was as essential as food, water, or spells from the Book of the Dead. It was a tool for eternal life, guaranteeing that the soul would not be blinded or deceived on its final journey. So, when we see those dramatic eyes staring back at us from temple walls and sarcophagi, we are witnessing a profound fusion of science, faith, and social order. The creation of Kohl was not a frivolous art, but a necessary craft, born from a civilization's deep desire to protect the body, elevate the spirit, and see clearly in both this world and the next. With the profound spiritual and social importance of Kohl established, we naturally arrive at a practical question of immense scale. Where did they get the materials to supply an entire civilization? The answer lies in the harsh, sun-scorched landscapes of the eastern desert and the distant peninsula of Sinai. This was not a casual gathering of pretty stones. It was a state-sponsored, large-scale mining industry that sent expeditions deep into the wilderness in search of two key minerals, galena and malachite. Galena, a lead sulfide ore, was the absolute cornerstone of Egyptian coal. When ground into a fine powder, it produces a lustrous, metallic gray-black pigment that provided that iconic, dramatic outline. Its heavier, more opaque quality made it the preferred choice for the classic Kohl line. For green hues, which were also popular, particularly for upper eyelids in certain periods, they turned to malachite. This stunning green copper carbonate mineral, with its beautiful banded patterns, offered a vibrant color that echoed the vitality of the Nile's vegetation and the turquoise stones they cherished. Venturing into these mining regions was a monumental undertaking. Imagine teams of skilled miners and laborers, equipped with nothing more than stone hammers, dolerite pounders, and fire-hardened wooden picks, traversing arid valleys to reach remote outcrops. Their work was brutally physical. They would first identify a vein of the desired ore, then use heat from fires to crack the rock before hammering it apart. The initial extraction was just the beginning. The rough chunks of galena or malachite then had to be painstakingly crushed at the mine site using heavy grinding stones. This pre-processing was crucial as it reduced the weight and volume of the material for the long, arduous journey back to the Nile Valley. These expeditions were logistically complex operations, requiring advance parties to establish water wells and supply routes, all under the burning sun. The miners themselves were often conscripted laborers or skilled workers who lived in temporary settlements near the mines, their lives dedicated to this grueling but essential task. The value of these raw materials cannot be overstated. Control over these mines was a direct source of pharaonic power and wealth. The galena mines of the eastern desert, in places like Jebel el Zayt, and the turquoise and copper mines of Serabit el Khadim in Sinai were crown property. Royal inscriptions at these sites celebrate the pharaohs who commissioned the expeditions, framing the successful extraction of minerals as a divine mandate fulfilled. This wasn't just an economic activity, it was a demonstration of the king's ability to harness the resources of the entire land, from the fertile riverbank to the most desolate desert. The raw, crushed ore was transported back to civilization in sacks and baskets, destined for the workshops where it would be transformed from a rough, earthy substance into a sacred and scientific marvel. It was this challenging, dangerous work at the very source that laid the foundation for every elegant Kohl pot and every protected pair of eyes in ancient Egypt. Once the precious galena or malachite arrived from the desolate mines, the real transformation began. Imagine holding a lump of raw galena in your hand. It's hard, crystalline, and utterly unsuitable for the delicate skin around the eyes. The challenge was to turn this rugged, metallic ore into a powder as fine and soft as modern eyeshadow, a process that required immense patience and a true artisan's touch. The primary tools for this task were deceptively simple: a flat, sturdy grinding stone known as a pallet, often made from slate or another smooth, hard rock, and a smaller handheld stone called a muller. The artisan would place a small amount of the pre-crushed ore onto the center of the pallet, and then, using the muller, begin a rhythmic, grinding motion, pressing down and moving in circular patterns to gradually pulverize the mineral. This wasn't a quick, brute force action, it was a controlled, sustained effort. The goal was to crush the ore without creating sharp, jagged edges. Each rotation of the muller slowly broke down the crystalline structure, releasing a finer and finer powder. The sound would have been a soft, persistent scraping, a whisper of stone on stone that echoed in workshops and homes across Egypt. Achieving the perfect consistency was a testament to skill honed over years. A coarse, gritty powder was completely unacceptable. It wouldn't apply smoothly, and worse, it could easily scratch the cornea or introduce abrasive particles into the eye, leading to severe irritation or infection. The artisan had to develop a feel for the material, knowing precisely how much pressure to apply and for how long. They would frequently stop to test the texture, rubbing a small pinch of the powder between their fingers to check for any remaining grit. The final product needed to be impeccably smooth, a velvety powder that would adhere to the skin and applicator without clumping. This level of fineness also had a very practical chemical purpose. A superfine powder had a much larger surface area, which meant it would mix more readily with oils or fats to create a paste, and it would also sit more comfortably and evenly on the eyelid. This meticulous process ensured that the protective, medicinal properties of the minerals could function without causing any physical harm. It was a perfect balance, harnessing the protective power of the earth while refining it into a form gentle enough for one of the most sensitive areas of the human body. This practice of trituration, the technical term for grinding substances into a fine powder, connected the humble artisan to the cosmic order the Egyptians called Ma'at, the principle of truth, balance, and harmony. The act of taking something raw, chaotic, and straight from the earth and refining it into a substance of beauty, protection, and order was a small-scale reflection of their entire worldview. They were bringing order out of chaos, just as the gods did at the dawn of creation. The finished Kohl, now a lustrous, homogeneous powder, was no longer just a rock, it was a perfected substance ready to be charged with spiritual intention and applied as a shield for both body and soul. The time and care invested in this grinding process elevated Kohl from a simple cosmetic into a sacred preparation, its physical smoothness mirroring the spiritual clarity and protection it was believed to provide. But even the most skillfully ground powder could still hide a few rogue, coarse particles, invisible to the naked eye but potentially disastrous for the delicate cornea. This is where the ancient artisans employed a final, crucial step of purification, sifting. After hours of grinding, the fine, dark powder would be carefully transferred onto a sieve made from the finest woven linen or a delicate mesh. Picture the artisan gently shaking this frame, tapping the side with a practiced rhythm, watching as a soft, sooty cloud of the perfect coal dust filtered through the tiny gaps in the fabric. What remained on top were the unwanted impurities, the last stubborn bits of grit, tiny fragments of the grinding stone, or any slightly larger mineral crystals that had escaped the muller. These were discarded, leaving behind only the most refined, velvety grade of pigment. This was the ultimate quality control, a process that separated the merely good from the truly exceptional and safe. The goal was to achieve a consistency almost like dense smoke, a powder that would feel like absolute nothingness when applied to the skin. This meticulous sifting was far more than a matter of luxury, it was a direct matter of health and safety. The human eye is an incredibly sensitive organ, and any foreign body, especially a sharp, microscopic piece of mineral, could cause a painful scratch or an abrasion on the surface of the eye. In the hot, dusty environment of ancient Egypt, such a minor injury could easily become a gateway for a serious infection, potentially leading to impaired vision or even blindness. By ensuring that every single grain of coal was fine enough to pass through the sieve, the Egyptians were practicing a form of preventative medicine. They were creating a product that delivered the therapeutic benefits of the minerals which, as we'll see, were real without any of the physical risks associated with a coarse, abrasive substance. This attention to detail reveals a sophisticated understanding of material science and human anatomy. They knew that for the magic to work, for the protection to be complete, the substance itself had to be flawless. The sieve was the final gatekeeper, guaranteeing that only the most benign and effective powder made its way into the precious coal jars and, ultimately, onto the eyes of the people. This act of sifting also carried a deeper, symbolic resonance that would not have been lost on the Egyptian mind. The entire process of creating coal, from mining the raw ore to grinding and finally sifting it, can be seen as a powerful metaphor for their concept of Ma'at, the universal order of truth and justice. The raw galena was like the chaotic, unrefined state of the world before creation. The grinding process began to impose order, breaking down the coarse chaos into something more manageable. But it was the sifting that represented the final purification, the separation of the beneficial from the harmful, the pure from the impure. Just as the heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of Ma'at in the afterlife, judged for its purity, the coal was sifted to remove its heavy, coarse elements. What remained was a substance of perfect balance and harmony, now fit not only for a human eye, but for the eye of a god. This refined powder was considered ritually clean, a pure substance capable of carrying divine protection. In this way, the simple, practical act of shaking a sieve was elevated into a final, transformative step, preparing the coal to fulfill its ultimate role as a bridge between the earthly and the divine. Now we have this beautifully refined, silken powder, but a new challenge emerges. How do you get it to stay on a delicate applicator and then adhere smoothly to the skin? A pile of dry dust, no matter how fine, would simply fall off a stick or brush and create a messy, uneven line. The ingenious solution was the binder, a substance that would transform the powder into a cohesive paste or even a solid cake. This was the crucial alchemy that turned prepared mineral into ready-to-use cosmetic, and the ancient Egyptians had several sophisticated options at their disposal. One of the most common and practical binders was animal fat, perhaps from sheep or cattle. When gently warmed, the fat would liquefy, allowing the Kohl powder to be mixed in thoroughly. As the mixture cooled, it would solidify into a firm, portable cake. This was incredibly convenient for travel or for keeping in a personal cosmetic kit. A person could simply moisten the tip of an applicator stick with a little water or saliva and rub it on the cake to pick up just the right amount of pigment. The fat base also had an emollient effect, helping the Kohl glide onto the skin without tugging and creating a smooth, even line that would last for hours. Another possibility, especially for a finer, more luxurious product, was the use of natural plant gums, gum arabic, a sap harvested from the acacia trees that dotted the Egyptian landscape, would have been an excellent choice. When mixed with water and the Kohl powder, it creates a smooth, fluid paste that can be stored in a small jar. This type of binder would have been ideal for application with a fine red or a padded stick, allowing for incredibly precise lines. Gum arabic dries to a slightly adhesive finish, helping the pigment lock in place more effectively than a greasy fat base, which might be prone to smudging in the heat. Then there were the various plant oils, castor oil, moringa oil, or balanos oil, all of which were known and used in ancient Egypt. An oil-based paste would have been smoother and less thick than a fat-based one, offering a different feel and finish on the skin. The choice of binder was far from arbitrary. It directly influenced the final product's performance, texture, and even its ritual significance. The evidence for these different recipes comes from both archaeological finds and scientific analysis. Residues found inside Kohl pots sometimes contain traces of fatty acids, the chemical fingerprints of ancient animal fats. In other containers, analysis has detected the presence of plant-based sugars indicative of gum. Think of the practical implications. A laborer working in the fields might have preferred a simple, sturdy cake of fat-bound Kohl that wouldn't spill and could be quickly reapplied. A noblewoman preparing for a temple ceremony or a palace feast, however, might have her cosmetics specially prepared by a skilled artisan using gum arabic to achieve the sharpest, most dramatic, and longest-lasting line possible. The texture and behavior of the Kohl were tailored to the needs and status of the user. A fat-based Kohl might impart a slight sheen, while a gum-based version could dry to an intense, matte black. This variety shows a nuanced understanding of material properties and a culture that valued choice and customization in its personal adornment, even thousands of years ago. Beyond mere practicality, the binder itself could carry layers of symbolic meaning. If we consider the use of animal fat, we must remember that in Egyptian religion, offerings to the gods frequently included choice cuts of meat. The fat from a sacrificial animal was considered a potent and desirable substance. By using this fat as a binder, the Kohl could be infused with an additional layer of sacredness, connecting the wearer to the world of ritual offerings. Similarly, gum arabic from the acacia tree held profound significance. The acacia was a sacred tree associated with life, rebirth, and the myth of Osiris. Some traditions even held that the gods were born under an acacia. Using a gum from this holy tree to create the paste for divine eye paint would have been a powerful act of sympathetic magic. It would have made the Kohl not just a representation of divine protection, but a physical embodiment of it, literally containing the sap of a tree linked to the gods and the cycle of life and death. The binder, therefore, was never just an inert glue. It was an active participant in the ritual, enhancing the kohl's power and aligning its very substance with the cosmic principles it was meant to invoke. But the sophistication of Egyptian kohl didn't end with a perfectly ground and bound mineral base. The true mastery of their recipes is revealed in the surprising, purposeful additives they mixed in, transforming the paste from a simple cosmetic into a potent, multi-functional preparation. Think beyond just color and consistency. This was ancient pharmacology and spiritual alchemy working in perfect harmony. One of the most significant discoveries from analyzing ancient kohl pots is the presence of various salts. In the marshy, fertile environment of the Nile, where stagnant water and flies were a constant part of daily life, the risk of devastating eye infections like trachoma was incredibly high. The Egyptians, through centuries of observation and experimentation, found a powerful solution. They intentionally blended salts like sal ammoniac, a natural ammonium chloride, or even common sea salt into their kohl mixtures. We now understand that these salts possess strong hygroscopic properties, meaning they actively draw moisture out of their surroundings. When applied to the skin around the eyes, this created a subtly drier environment, one that was far less hospitable to the bacteria that cause infections. This wasn't a mystical guess, it was a practical, effective medical treatment. Every time an Egyptian parent applied this salted kohl to their child's eyes, they were administering a powerful, preventative antibiotic, shielding their vision from the very real dangers of their environment. The brilliance of this practice deepens when we consider the primary mineral, galena, which is a lead-based compound. To the modern mind, putting lead near the eyes sounds immediately alarming. However, recent scientific research has uncovered a fascinating protective mechanism. When the lead sulfide in the galena came into contact with the salts in the mixture and the salt chloride naturally present in human tears, a remarkable chemical reaction was triggered on the skin's surface. This reaction stimulated the body's immune cells to produce a surge of nitric oxide, a molecule we now know is a potent antimicrobial agent. So, rather than being a silent poison, the lead in the kohl, when combined with its other ingredients, was actually catalyzing the body's own natural defense system. The Egyptians had stumbled upon a complex biochemical process they couldn't possibly have understood in our terms, but they knew it worked. They observed that people who used kohl suffered far fewer eye ailments, and so they perfected the recipe. This is a stunning example of an empirical scientific discovery. They knew the what long before they could possibly grasp the why. Their kohl was a functional, therapeutic nanotechnology fighting infection at the cellular level thousands of years before the concept of a cell even existed. Alongside these medicinal salts, the kohl mixture was also a vessel for pure magic. The physical world and the spiritual world were inseparable for the Egyptians, and protecting oneself required defenses against unseen forces as much as visible germs. This is where we find the truly enchanting additives, crushed gemstones and sacred herbs. Lapis lazuli, imported from distant Afghanistan at great expense, was a stone of the gods, its deep, celestial blue flecked with golden pyrite resembling a starry night sky. To incorporate powdered lapis lazuli into a kohl recipe was to literally paint the heavens onto your eyelids. It was believed to harness the protective power of the sky itself, creating a direct link to the divine and repelling evil spirits with its sacred essence. Similarly, the vibrant green powder of malachite was not just a color, it was the color of new life, of flourishing vegetation, and of the god Osiris, the ruler of the afterlife and symbol of resurrection. Wearing malachite kohl was an act of sympathetic magic, inviting the powers of life, vitality, and rebirth into one's very being, while its potent color was thought to neutralize malevolent energies. These recipes could get incredibly specific and complex. A kohl intended for a priest performing a specific ritual might include a meticulously chosen blend of ingredients, each selected for its symbolic resonance. Imagine a paste containing the protective galena, the healing salts, the divine blue lapis, and finally, a few crushed leaves of a sacred herb like lotus or papyrus. The lotus, emerging pristine from muddy waters, was a powerful symbol of rebirth and the sun god. Papyrus, the plant from which their world of writing and wisdom sprang, represented knowledge and order triumphing over the chaos of the swamp. By grinding these plants into the kohl, the user was blending their essence into the protective paste. The final product was therefore a layered masterpiece of intention. It was a physical shield against infection, a chemical trigger for the immune system, and a spiritual barrier woven from the very fabric of the cosmos. Applying it each morning was a ritual of preparing the whole self-body, mind, and spirit for the challenges of the day and the threats of the night. This was the ultimate genius of Egyptian kohl. It was never just one thing, but a perfect, holistic fusion of science and magic, each ingredient chosen to serve a purpose in their interconnected view of reality. Now, with our complex kohl recipe fully understood, we need to bring it to life, and for that, we turn to the very object that made it possible, the cosmetic palette. This was far more than just a mixing dish. It was a personal, portable laboratory and a potent status symbol, all rolled into one. In its earliest form, during the pre-dynastic period before the Great Pyramids, the palette was a model of pure, no-nonsense functionality. Imagine a simple, rectangular slab of smooth, gray-green schist, perhaps no larger than the palm of your hand. It was sturdy, with a slightly concave surface that naturally kept the precious mineral powder from spilling over the edges. These first palettes were the essential tools of everyday life, used by nearly everyone to grind their own kohl, mixing the powdered galena with a drop of oil or fat right there on the stone. The grinding process would, over time, wear a gentle depression into the center of the slate, a physical record of daily care and preparation. This was a deeply personal object, often placed in graves to ensure the deceased could continue their protective rituals in the afterlife. But as Egyptian society grew more complex and stratified, so too did its artifacts. The simple schist slab began a remarkable evolution, transforming from a utilitarian tool into a breathtaking work of art that reflected the power and divine authority of the pharaohs. By the time of the early dynastic periods, we see the emergence of the ceremonial palette, objects of such intricate carving and symbolic depth that they were clearly never meant for the messy work of grinding kohl. The most famous of these is the Narmer palette, a monumental piece of siltstone that stands as one of the earliest historical documents from a unified Egypt. It's not a tool, it's a statement. Its surface is covered in detailed relief carvings depicting the king, Narmer, wearing the crowns of both Upper and Lower Egypt, symbolically smiting his enemies. This palette proclaims the power of the king to bring order from chaos, a theme directly mirrored in the act of creating kohl from raw ore. Other ceremonial palettes took on beautiful zoomorphic forms, carved into the shapes of animals laden with meaning, a hippopotamus, a turtle, a pair of fish, or a powerful bull. These creatures were not random, each was connected to specific deities and cosmic principles. So, what was the purpose of these elaborate, non-functional palettes if not for grinding? They were ceremonial offerings, likely dedicated to temples to commemorate a great victory or a jubilee festival. They served as a permanent, stone representation of the king's role as the ultimate maintainer of Mad. The act of creating kohl, of imposing order on chaotic raw materials, was a microcosm of the pharaoh's duty to impose order on the nation. By offering a beautifully carved palette to the gods, the king was symbolically presenting the perfected result of that process. It was a way of saying, "I have done my job, I have ground the chaos of the world into the harmony you desire." For the elite, owning a finely carved, functional palette made of alabaster or ivory was a way to participate in this royal ideology. Even a wealthy noble's palette, while used for its intended purpose, was a piece of prestige, signaling their elevated status and their connection to the sophisticated culture of the court. At the heart of nearly every palette, whether a simple slate or an ornate treasure, was its most crucial feature, the central well. This was the functional core of the entire object. On a basic palette, it might simply be the worn-down depression from years of use. On a more deliberately crafted one, it was a carefully carved, circular hollow, often surrounded by multiple smaller depressions. This central well was the stage where all the components of our Kohl recipe came together. Here, the pre-crushed galena or malachite would be placed. A few drops of oil, melted fat, or gum Arabic solution would be added. Then, using a small, smooth handstone called a muller, the individual would begin the rhythmic, meditative process of grinding and mixing. The circular wall of the well contained the mixture, preventing any precious powder from escaping during the vigorous grinding. The goal was to achieve a perfectly homogeneous paste, with every mineral particle evenly coated in the binder, resulting in a consistent color and a smooth, clump-free texture that would apply flawlessly. The design was brilliantly practical. Multiple smaller wells on a single pallet allowed for experimentation and customization. One well could hold a basic, everyday black coal made from galena and fat. Another might be reserved for a special, ritual green paste made from malachite and fragrant oil. A third could be used to crush a sacred herb or a piece of lapis lazuli to be blended into the main mixture. This modular design turned the palette into a compact cosmetic workshop. After the paste was prepared, it could be scooped out with a tiny spoon or a finger and transferred into a small coal pot for storage and daily use. The palette itself would then be wiped clean, ready for the next preparation. This entire ritual, from the grinding to the application, was a tangible, hands-on process. It connected the user physically to the substances they were using, a daily reaffirmation of their role in maintaining their own health, beauty, and spiritual protection. The humble cosmetic palette, in all its forms, was therefore the essential engine of this ancient practice, the quiet, unassuming tool that made the magic of the iconic Egyptian eye a daily reality. Once you had your perfectly prepared coal paste, the next essential step was finding the right vessel to keep it safe, pure, and ready for use. The ancient Egyptians turned this simple need for storage into an art form, creating containers that were as diverse and meaningful as the substance they held. At the most basic level, for the everyday farmer or laborer, a container could be as simple as a hollowed-out reed, its end sealed with a dab of wax or a twist of linen. Others might use a smooth, empty snail shell, its natural cavity providing the perfect small, protected space for a day's supply of pigment. These were solutions born of practicality and immediacy, using the materials readily available from the Nile's environment. They were personal, portable, and disposable, reflecting a life where function trumped finery. Yet, even in these humble objects, we see the universal importance of the coal itself. It was so vital that everyone, regardless of their means, found a way to keep it close at hand. For those with more resources, the coal pot evolved into a cherished personal possession, a tiny masterpiece of craftsmanship and symbolism. These were not generic jars, they were specifically designed for their purpose. A very common and clever design was the tube-shaped vessel, often carved from wood, stone, or faience. Imagine a miniature column, no taller than your finger, with a small, hollow chamber inside. These tubes were frequently crafted in pairs and connected by a small bridge, creating a single, elegant object with two separate compartments. This ingenious design solved a very practical problem. One side could hold the black coal made from galena, while the other stored the green malachite paste. This allowed the user to have both of their essential cosmetics in one convenient, easily transportable item. The lid was just as thoughtfully designed, typically a small, flat disc that slid snugly into the top of the tube or was attached by a tiny cord to prevent it from being lost. This tight seal was crucial for keeping the precious paste from drying out in the arid climate or from being contaminated by dust and insects. The materials used for these containers spoke volumes about the owner's status and the ritual significance they attached to the kohl. For the middle class and wealthy elites, the most beloved material was undoubtedly Egyptian faience. This was not the glazed pottery we think of today. It was a brilliant, self-glazing composite material made from crushed quartz sand. It could be molded and fired into a stunning array of shapes and, most famously, into a vibrant, luminous turquoise blue or deep green. The color itself was magical. That brilliant blue-green was the color of life, of the Nile's rejuvenating waters, and of the heavens. A kohl pot made of faience wasn't just a container, it was a tiny, shimmering amulet in its own right, its very substance radiating protective energy. Holding your kohl in a faience pot meant you were storing it within a piece of the divine, reinforcing the paste's power every time you opened it. For the highest echelons of society, the royalty, the priesthood, the court officials, the materials became even more exquisite and luxurious. Alabaster was a favorite choice. This soft, translucent white stone, often veined with gentle streaks of brown or gray, could be carved into vessels of breathtaking delicacy. An alabaster kohl pot, cool to the touch and smooth as silk, would capture and soften the light, giving the container an almost ethereal glow. Other nobles might possess pots made from obsidian, a glossy black volcanic glass that could be polished to a mirror-like finish, reflecting the dark power of the kohl within. The very richest might even have containers made from solid silver or gold, metals associated with the flesh of the gods. These were not merely displays of wealth, they were profound statements of divine connection. Storing a substance meant to connect you with Horus or Ra in a vessel made of a god's metal was the ultimate act of symbolic alignment, blurring the line between the cosmetic and the consecrated. The shapes of these pots were also deeply symbolic, often drawing from the rich visual language of Egyptian religion. Many were crafted in the form of a lotus bud, the beautiful flower that emerged each morning from the primordial waters, a powerful symbol of the sun, creation, and rebirth. Using a lotus-shaped kohl pot meant that every time you opened it, you were reenacting the dawn of creation, anointing your eyes with the power of a new beginning. Other pots took the form of a hes vase, a ceremonial vessel used for libations to the gods, directly linking the act of applying kohl to the act of making a sacred offering. Some were even shaped like the hieroglyph for unity or the jed pillar, the symbol of Osiris's backbone, representing stability and eternal life. This transformation of a mundane object into a symbolic one is a classic feature of Egyptian culture. It shows a world view where nothing was truly mundane. Every item, no matter how small, was an opportunity to express one's faith, hopes, and understanding of the cosmos. This profound personal connection is why kohl pots are found so frequently in tombs, placed carefully beside the deceased. They were not just sentimental keepsakes, they were essential grave goods, as necessary for the afterlife as food, water, or a copy of the Book of the Dead. The journey through the underworld was fraught with peril, and the deceased needed to see clearly to navigate its treacherous landscapes, recognize friendly gods, and avoid demonic beings. A personal kohl pot, often still containing a dried residue of the paste, guaranteed that this vital protection would continue forever. In some cases, we find that the pot buried with an individual was clearly their everyday object, worn smooth from years of use. In others, especially for royalty, special funerary versions were created, sometimes even made of solid gold, ensuring their efficacy for eternity. This practice beautifully closes the loop on the Kohl's purpose. It began its life as raw ore in a desolate mine, was transformed through skill and ritual into a protective substance, was stored in a container that amplified its power, and was finally buried as a key to eternal sight and safety, completing its journey from the earth back to the realm of the gods. With the Kohl prepared and stored, the final, most intimate step was its application, a precise ritual that turned a prepared substance into the iconic look we recognize millennia later. The tool for this task was as elegantly simple as it was effective: the Kohl stick, or applicator. These were slender rods, typically the length of a modern pencil or a bit shorter, crafted from a variety of materials depending on one's station in life. For most Egyptians, a simple, polished stick of wood or a smooth sliver of bone served perfectly well. These could be easily whittled to a point or shaped with a softened, rounded tip. For those with greater means, applicators made of bronze, ivory, or even glass have been found, objects that were both functional tools and personal treasures. The design was universally straightforward: a slim rod that could be easily held and manipulated with a steady hand, allowing for the control needed to trace a perfect line along the sensitive lash line. Before the stick ever touched the skin, it had to be prepared. A user would first moisten the very tip of the applicator. This was often done with a quick touch of the tongue or by dipping it into a tiny dish of water. This step was crucial. A dry stick would simply scatter the fine Kohl powder, while a wet tip would grab and hold the pigment, forming a pasty clump on the end that could be smoothly transferred to the skin. The moistened tip was then dipped into the Kohl pot, swirling it in the dark powder or pressing it against a hardened cake to pick up just the right amount of product. It was a careful balancing act. Too little moisture and the powder wouldn't adhere, too much, and the resulting line could be messy and runny. This initial preparation required a practiced touch, a small but vital part of the daily routine that ensured a flawless application. Then came the moment of transformation. Standing before a polished bronze mirror, the individual would steady their hand and begin to draw. The goal was not a thin, subtle line tucked into the lashes, but a bold, graphic statement that dramatically elongated the shape of the eye. Starting from the inner corner of the upper lid, they would draw a line that followed the natural curve of the eye socket, but then continued it outward, extending the line well past the outer corner in a sweeping curve that reached all the way towards the temple. This same process was repeated on the lower lid, with the line starting from the inner corner and meeting the upper line at the temple, creating a sharp, elongated almond shape that framed the eye. This distinctive outline is one of the most recognizable features of Egyptian art, and it was achieved with remarkable consistency across all levels of society. The applicator's smooth, rounded tip allowed the paste to glide on without scratching, while the user's skill ensured the lines were even, symmetrical, and powerfully expressive. This was far from a haphazard swipe of color. The process required immense concentration and a steady hand, making it a moment of quiet focus each morning. For many, it would have been a meditative act, a time to consciously invoke the protection of the gods as they physically drew the sacred shape of the Eye of Horus onto their own faces. The extension of the line towards the temple wasn't merely an aesthetic choice, it was a deliberate channel, a way to direct the protective power of the Kohl outwards, deflecting evil influences that might approach from the sides. In a very practical sense, this thick, all-encompassing border also helped to keep the medicinal Kohl in constant contact with the skin around the entire eye, maximizing its therapeutic, antibacterial benefits throughout the day. The famous almond shape was therefore the result of a perfect convergence of spiritual belief, medical necessity, and artistic convention, all applied with a single, carefully held tool. The social dimension of this ritual is also fascinating to consider. While many individuals applied their own kohl, the act could also be one of intimacy and care. Depictions in tombs sometimes show servants or family members applying makeup for a seated figure. A mother might carefully line the eyes of her child, ensuring the youngster was protected before they went out to play. A wife might apply her husband's kohl, or a servant might prepare their master or mistress for the day. In these shared moments, the application of kohl reinforced social bonds and hierarchies. It was a gesture of protection and care, one person ensuring another was spiritually and physically shielded. The trust involved was profound. Allowing someone to hold a sharp stick so close to your eyes is an act of deep faith, whether in their skill or in your relationship. This transforms the kohl stick from a simple tool into an instrument of connection, an object that facilitated moments of quiet devotion and daily tenderness within the bustling world of ancient Egypt. Ultimately, the final look was a masterpiece of personal and cultural expression. When you look at a statue of Nefertiti or the golden mask of Tutankhamun, you are seeing the culmination of this entire elaborate process. You are seeing the result of mined galena, meticulous grinding, sacred additives, and finally, the steady hand that guided the applicator. That bold, dramatic eye is not an exaggeration by an artist, it is a faithful representation of a lived reality. It is the look of a person who believed they were walking through a world filled with both tangible dangers and invisible forces, armed with a substance that offered a defense against both. The kohl stick was the final, crucial interface between the human and the divine, the tool that painted a layer of the cosmos directly onto the skin, allowing every Egyptian to face the day and the afterlife with clear sight, divine favor, and an unmistakable, timeless elegance. So, who is actually behind this entire process, from the grinding to the final application? While the pharaohs and nobles are often the faces we see adorned with kohl, the hands that created it were most often those of women within the home. The creation of kohl was, for the vast majority of Egyptians, a deeply domestic craft. Picture a mother and her daughter sitting in the shade of their mud brick home, a simple slate palette resting between them. The mother would guide her daughter's hand, teaching her the specific pressure and circular motion needed to grind the galena to the perfect, velvety consistency without creating any damaging grit. This was practical knowledge passed from one generation to the next, a vital skill every woman was expected to master. She would share the family's preferred recipe, perhaps a bit more oil for a smoother paste in the dry summer, or a pinch of a specific salt known to soothe a child's irritated eyes. This wasn't just about making someone look beautiful, it was about equipping the next generation with the knowledge to protect their family's health and spiritual well-being. The kohl recipe was a form of inherited wisdom, as important as knowing how to prepare food or weave cloth. This domestic setting was the primary workshop for kohl production across the land. In a typical household, the tools were simple and integrated into daily life. The grinding pallet might be the same stone used to crush herbs for cooking or medicines. The storage containers could be reeds or small, undecorated pots. The entire process, from sifting the powder with a scrap of linen to mixing in the binding agent, was a routine household chore, as normal as baking bread. Women were the guardians of this intimate knowledge, responsible for ensuring the household supply was always safe, effective, and ritually prepared. They would have been the ones to identify the best quality raw materials from local traders, to know how long a prepared paste would last, and to understand which specific mixture was best for a baby's sensitive skin versus a laborer facing a day in the dusty fields. This daily hands-on role placed women at the very heart of a practice that was central to Egyptian identity, giving them a quiet but profound authority over an art form that bridged the physical and spiritual worlds. However, just as with every other aspect of Egyptian society, there was a hierarchy even in coal production. While most families made their own, the demand for the highest quality, most luxurious, and most ritually potent coal for the elite and the gods necessitated a class of specialized artisans. These were the master cosmetic makers, the perfumers and chemists of their day, who operated workshops, likely under royal or temple patronage. Their job was to produce coal that was not just functional, but transcendent. They would have had access to the rarest and most expensive ingredients, the finest, deepest black galena from specific royal mines, powdered lapis lazuli imported across vast trade networks, and the purest oils and gums. Their workshops would have been filled with an array of specialized equipment, pallets made of exotic stones, delicate balances for weighing minute quantities of additives, and rows of stunning faience and alabaster jars for storing the finished product. These artisans were more than just manufacturers, they were keepers of advanced, secret recipes. A temple, for instance, might commission a specific coal for a statue of a god or for use in a particular festival. This sacred coal would require a recipe of immense symbolic precision, perhaps incorporating dust from the temple's own sanctuary or water from a sacred well, blending the mineral's innate power with the direct essence of the divine. The royal court would demand coal that projected power and wealth, perhaps with a unique iridescent sheen achieved by adding finely ground pearl oyster shell or a specific fragrance from rare resins. The work of these specialists was a blend of advanced chemistry, artistic sensibility, and deep religious understanding. They were the ones pushing the boundaries of the craft, experimenting with new mineral combinations and binding agents to create products that were as much works of art as they were cosmetics. This duality in production, the domestic and the artisanal, perfectly mirrors the structure of ancient Egyptian society itself. The common people relied on self-sufficiency and inherited knowledge, a practice that fostered family bonds and community continuity. At the same time, the elite could access a tier of luxury and specialization that reinforced their status and connection to the gods. Both spheres, however, were united in their understanding of coal's profound importance. Whether prepared by a mother's hands in a modest home or by a master artisan in a dedicated workshop, the final product served the same essential purposes: protection, health, and divine alignment. This social context reveals that the story of Egyptian coal is not just one of minerals and recipes, but a story of people of the women who safeguarded their families' well-being through daily ritual, and the skilled craftsmen who elevated a simple paste into an object of sacred power for the state. But how can we be so certain about these intricate recipes and their profound uses? Our knowledge doesn't come from guesswork. It is directly gifted to us by the ancient Egyptians themselves, preserved on the fragile pages of papyrus and etched into the stone walls of tombs for eternity. These are our most vital windows into their world, and they reveal a civilization that documented its cosmetic and medical expertise with meticulous care. Among the most extraordinary of these documents is the Ebers Papyrus, a massive scroll dating back to around 1550 BC, which reads like a comprehensive medical encyclopedia for its time. Within its extensive list of remedies, we find specific, detailed recipes for coal, not merely as a cosmetic, but as a prescribed treatment for eye diseases. The papyrus doesn't just say, use coal, it provides exact formulas. One passage might instruct a physician to take galena, mix it with a specific ratio of crushed ostrich eggshell, honey, and ochre, before applying it to the eye to combat a condition like trachoma or to repel flies. This is a direct recipe from an ancient doctor's manual, a clear indication that coal was a standard part of the medicinal toolkit, its preparation and application governed by a developed understanding of therapeutics. Other papyri, like the Edwin Smith or Hurst papyri, supplement this picture, offering variations on these recipes that were likely tailored to different symptoms or available ingredients. What's truly striking is the clinical tone of these documents. They diagnose conditions, list ingredients with the precision of a modern pharmacist, and provide instructions for compounding the medicine. They represent the codification of knowledge gained over centuries of observation and practice. When we read that a Kohl recipe in the Ebers Papyrus includes selenite, a form of gypsum, we can now understand that this added a source of calcium sulfate, which could have further soothing properties. These texts transform our understanding from speculation to documented fact. They show us that the ancient Egyptian physician, or SWNW, possessed a sophisticated pharmacopoeia where Kohl played a versatile and essential role, bridging the gap between preventative care and active treatment for some of the most common and debilitating ailments of their era. While the papyri give us the written formulas, it is the tomb walls that provide the vibrant, visual storyboard for how these recipes were brought to life. The silent, sacred chambers of nobles and officials are adorned with breathtakingly detailed paintings and reliefs that capture the full spectrum of daily life, ensuring these activities would continue for the deceased in the afterlife. In these scenes, we don't just see people wearing kohl, we witness its entire life cycle. One famous depiction might show a group of servants or craftsmen in a wealthy household, actively engaged in the preparation process. We can see a man kneeling, leaning over a grinding pallet, his arm muscles taut as he works a muller in a circular motion, crushing the dark ore. Another figure might be shown sifting the freshly ground powder through a piece of linen stretched over a bowl, a visual confirmation of the purification step we discussed earlier. These are not symbolic gestures, they are snapshots of a real industrial process. Further along the tomb wall, the narrative continues into more intimate, personal spaces. We are often granted a privileged view into the private quarters of the tomb owner, where a scene of grooming and adornment is unfolding. A seated noblewoman or man is depicted with perfect posture, often holding a bronze mirror. Standing before them is a servant, their body curved in a posture of attentive care, one hand gently steadying their master's chin while the other hand, holding a slender kohl stick, is brought with immense precision to the corner of the eye. The artist has frozen this moment of application, capturing the concentration on both faces, the trust involved, and the graceful, deliberate motion required to create that iconic line. These images answer so many of our questions. They show us the social context of application, the specific postures and tools used, and they immortalize the act as one of both daily necessity and high-status refinement. Perhaps the most powerful evidence comes from the tombs of the highest elites, such as the treasure-filled burial of Tutankhamun. Here, we move beyond two-dimensional depictions into the three-dimensional reality. Among the thousands of objects buried with the young king were his actual, personal cosmetic items. Archaeologists discovered exquisite kohl pots, some of solid alabaster, others of beautifully carved wood, many still containing the very kohl paste used over 3,000 years ago. Alongside them were the applicator's slender, elegant wands of ivory and glass, lying exactly where they were placed, waiting to be of service. This is the ultimate fusion of the textual and the visual. The papyri gave us the recipe, the tomb paintings showed us the method, and Tutankhamun's grave goods delivered the physical proof. To hold one of those pots is to hold a direct link to the past, to see the residue of a substance that was not just a legend, but a lived reality for a pharaoh. It confirms every detail, from the quality of the containers to the fact that this sacred and scientific practice followed them into the afterlife, proving that its importance was truly, without question, eternal. This intersection of spiritual practice and practical health reaches its most fascinating point when we examine it through a modern scientific lens. For decades, the discovery of lead in Egyptian coal was viewed with a kind of horrified fascination, a seeming contradiction where an advanced civilization appeared to be poisoning itself in the name of beauty. We now understand that the reality is far more complex and brilliant. The key ingredient, galena, is a lead sulfide compound, and while pure lead is undoubtedly toxic, the story of how it behaves in the specific context of Egyptian coal is one of surprising biological cleverness. Researchers began to unravel this mystery by looking beyond the simple presence of lead and focusing on the complete chemical environment created by the coal paste on the skin. They discovered that the lead salts in the galena don't act alone. When applied to the skin around the eyes, these salts interact with the chloride ions naturally present in human sweat and tears. This interaction, a subtle electrochemical process happening at the microscopic level, triggers a remarkable response from the body's own immune system. The crucial mechanism involves the production of nitric oxide. Today, we recognize nitric oxide as a vital signaling molecule in the human body, a key player in regulating blood flow, neural communication, and, most importantly for this story, the immune response. The lead salts in the coal act as a catalyst, stimulating the skin's immune cells, called macrophages, to produce a small, controlled burst of nitric oxide right at the site of application. Why is this so significant? Because nitric oxide is a potent antimicrobial agent. It effectively attacks the cell walls of invading bacteria, disrupting their function and preventing them from establishing an infection. In the dusty, fly-ridden environment of ancient Egypt, common bacterial eye infections like conjunctivitis, also known as pink eye, would have been a constant threat. This daily application of Kohl, therefore, was essentially creating a low-level, continuous antimicrobial defense system around one of the most vulnerable entry points on the human body. It wasn't a magic charm keeping spirits at bay. It was a functional, biochemical shield actively helping the body fight off real, physical pathogens. This explains the long-held empirical observation that coal users had healthier eyes. The Egyptians didn't know what nitric oxide was, and they certainly didn't understand cellular immunology. What they knew, through generations of trial and observation, was that people who used their specific coal recipes suffered far fewer instances of the swelling, discharge, and potential blindness that came from rampant eye infections. They perfected a formula that worked, even if the why remained a mystery for millennia. This is a classic example of ancient technology preceding modern scientific explanation. Their success was based on a deep, accumulated wisdom of cause and effect. They saw that a substance drawn from the earth, when prepared and applied in a specific way, resulted in clearer, healthier eyes. The spiritual narrative of protection from the evil eye provided the cultural framework, while this hidden biochemical process provided the tangible, medical benefit. Both explanations coexisted, one addressing the unseen world of malevolent forces, and the other, albeit unknowingly, addressing the unseen world of microscopic bacteria. The sophistication of this practice is further highlighted when we consider the other intentional additives in the coal mixture. The salts like sal ammoniac that we discussed earlier weren't just random inclusions, they played a synergistic role in this protective system. Their hygroscopic or water-attracting nature helped to create a drier environment around the eye, making it less hospitable for bacteria that thrive in moisture. So, while the lead-stimulated nitric oxide was actively attacking pathogens, the salts were passively making the local environment more hostile to their survival. This multi-pronged approach shows a nuanced understanding of treatment, even if it was framed in terms of balancing bodily humors or repelling pests. The Kohl was a sophisticated, multi-functional prophylactic. It wasn't just one active ingredient, it was a complete system designed to maintain ocular health through a combination of chemical catalysis and environmental control. This reveals a level of practical, medical insight that we are only now fully appreciating, showing that the line between their ancient rituals and our modern medicine is far thinner and more fascinating than we ever imagined. While the deep, dramatic black of galena-based Kohl defined the Egyptian eye, it was far from the only color in their cosmetic arsenal. This was a culture that painted its world with intention, and their faces were no exception. To see only the black liner is to miss the full, vibrant picture of an art form that celebrated the entire spectrum of sacred hues. Alongside the iconic Kohl, a brilliant green pigment held a place of nearly equal importance, often used to adorn the upper eyelids and create a stunning contrast with the dark lines. This vibrant green came from malachite, a stunning copper carbonate mineral with beautiful, swirling bands of light and dark green. Sourcing malachite required the same ambitious mining expeditions as galena, often from the same regions in the Sinai Peninsula and the Eastern Desert. When ground into a fine powder, it produced a rich, opaque green that evoked the most vital forces in the Egyptian world. This was the color of new life, the first shoots of emmer wheat sprouting after the Nile's inundation, the lush papyrus thickets along the riverbanks, and the vibrant leaves of the sycamore fig tree, which was itself considered a divine entity. The application of green malachite was deeply symbolic, directly connecting the wearer to the god Osiris, the ruler of the afterlife and the ultimate symbol of resurrection and fertility. Osiris was often depicted with green skin, representing his power over vegetation and the promise of eternal life beyond death. By painting their eyelids with this sacred green, individuals were invoking his regenerative power. It was an act of sympathetic magic, a way to absorb the god's vitality and ensure their own rebirth in the next world. But the use of malachite wasn't purely spiritual, it was also deeply practical. Copper, the primary element in malachite, is known to have antiseptic and anti-inflammatory properties. While they may not have understood the chemistry, the Egyptians observed that the green paste helped soothe irritated eyelids and prevent infections, just as the black Kohl did. This created a powerful, two-tiered system of protection, the black galena Kohl outlining the eyes to ward off evil spirits and stimulate the immune response, and the green malachite on the lid itself to promote healing and symbolize the eternal cycle of life. This combination shows a holistic approach to well-being, where spiritual and physical health were treated as one and the same. Beyond the eyes, the Egyptian cosmetic regimen extended to the cheeks and lips, adding warmth and vitality to the face. For this, they turned to the earth itself, using red ochre, a naturally occurring pigment rich in iron oxide. This was the same material they used to paint the walls of their tombs and temples, a color associated with life, power, and the scorching desert sun. Red ochre was readily available and easily processed. It would be ground into a powder and then mixed with water or animal fat to create a creamy paste that could be applied with the fingers or a simple pad of linen. A touch of this ruddy color on the cheeks and lips brought a flush of health and energy to the complexion, mimicking the natural appearance of a body coursing with life. In a culture that prized vitality and vigor, this was not about vanity, but about presenting oneself as a vibrant, living being, fully aligned with the potent forces of the natural world. The use of red also carried a potent connection to two of the most powerful and dangerous deities in their pantheon, Seth and Sekhmet. Seth, the god of chaos, storms, and the desert's harshness, was often associated with the color red, representing his destructive potential. Sekhmet, the fierce lioness goddess of war and pestilence, was a deity of such immense power that she could both cause and cure plague. Her name means the powerful one, and she was envisioned as a being of pure, terrifying red energy. Using red ochre was a way to harness this raw, untamed power for protection. By wearing the color of these formidable gods, an individual could tap into their strength, daring any malevolent force to challenge someone under the patronage of such potent beings. It was a bold statement, a declaration that the wearer possessed the inner fortitude to control the chaotic forces that Seth represented and the destructive power that Sekhmet wielded. This transformed a simple cheek stain into a defiant amulet, a daily armor against the chaos of the world. When we step back and view this full cosmetic regimen together, we see a masterpiece of layered meaning and intention. The Egyptian face became a living canvas upon which the entire cosmos was mapped. The stark black lines of Kohl, echoing the Eye of Horus, framed the windows to the soul, offering divine protection and sharpening sight. The lush green malachite on the lids connected the wearer to the eternal, regenerative power of Osiris and the fertile Nile. The warm red ochre on the cheeks and lips invoke the vital, and sometimes dangerous, life force of the sun and the desert, channeling the power of deities like Sekhmet for defense. This was not a random collection of colors, it was a coordinated, symbolic system. Each hue had its designated place and purpose, working in concert to create a harmonious whole. The face itself became a microcosm of the Egyptian universe, a balance of order and chaos, life and death, the protective and the potent. This sophisticated palette was accessible to all, yet the quality and presentation of these cosmetics revealed one's place in the social hierarchy. A laborer might have a single, multi-purpose stone palette for grinding both black and green pigments, storing them in simple rayed tubes. A noblewoman, however, would possess an elaborate cosmetic chest made of ebony or ivory, containing a set of matching alabaster jars, one for black coal, another for green malachite paste, and a third for red ochre, each with its own specific applicator. Her tools might include a polished bronze hand mirror, fine brushes made of bundled plant fibers for the ochre, and delicate spoons for scooping the pigments. The very act of adorning herself was a ritualized performance, a daily reaffirmation of her status and her piety. She wasn't just applying makeup, she was carefully assembling her divine and social identity, piece by piece, color by color. This transformation through cosmetics was a deeply personal yet universally understood language, a non-verbal communication of one's health, wealth, and relationship with the gods. Ultimately, this full cosmetic regimen underscores a fundamental truth about ancient Egyptian culture: nothing was ever just decorative. Every object, every color, every ritual gesture was saturated with meaning. The iconic black coal lines we so easily recognize were merely the most prominent part of a much richer and more complex practice. By understanding the roles of green malachite and red ochre, we gain a more complete picture of a people who saw their own bodies as vessels for cosmic power. They did not separate their spiritual beliefs from their daily routines. Instead, they woven them together into a seamless tapestry of life. To paint one's face was to participate in the ongoing drama of creation, to align oneself with the gods, and to arm oneself for the challenges of both the mortal world and the journey beyond. This holistic approach to beauty and protection remains one of their most enduring legacies, a testament to a civilization that found the divine in every detail of human existence. The deep cultural and spiritual demand for coal meant that its production was never just a local craft, it was a powerful engine driving some of the most ambitious economic and political ventures of the ancient Egyptian state. To supply an entire civilization with a steady stream of galena, malachite, and rare additives, the pharaohs had to look beyond the fertile Nile Valley, projecting their power into the harsh, mineral-rich deserts that formed their natural borders. Control over these regions was not merely a matter of territorial pride, it was a direct source of royal wealth, and a demonstration of the king's ability to provide for the gods and the people. The Sinai Peninsula, in particular, became a crown jewel of this industrial enterprise. For centuries, Egyptian expeditions braved the searing heat and treacherous terrain of Sinai to reach the legendary mines of Serabit el-Khadim and Wadi Maghara. These were not small-scale operations. They were state-sponsored endeavors involving hundreds, sometimes thousands, of skilled miners, soldiers, and support staff. They established semi-permanent settlements near the mines, complete with temples dedicated to Hathor, the Lady of Turquoise, who was viewed as the divine patroness of these ventures. The success of an expedition was a direct reflection of the pharaoh's favor with the gods, and the precious turquoise and copper extracted there were celebrated in royal inscriptions as divine gifts, securing both the materials for cosmetics and the metals for tools and weapons. This control over Sinai created a powerful economic feedback loop. The minerals flowed into Egypt, where they were transformed into coal and other valuable goods. This finished coal, now a product of both natural resource and sophisticated craftsmanship, could then be traded or gifted, enhancing Egypt's prestige and creating a desirable commodity for exchange. But the Egyptian appetite for exotic and potent ingredients could not be satisfied by domestic sources alone. This is where we see the vast, interconnected trade networks of the Bronze Age come into play, with coal acting as both a driver and a beneficiary of long-distance exchange. To the south, the Kingdom of Nubia was a critical partner. While Egypt often sought to control Nubia politically, the region remained a vital source of gold, ebony, and ivory materials that could be used to craft the luxurious cosmetic containers and applicators befitting the elite. More importantly for our story, trade routes stretching deeper into Africa may have brought rare aromatic resins, precious woods, and perhaps even unique mineral pigments that found their way into the most exclusive coal recipes. A Nubian trade delegation arriving at the pharaoh's court would have brought goods that augmented the entire cosmetic ritual, from the substance in the pot to the elegant tools used to apply it. To the northeast, the vibrant city-states of the Levant, modern-day Lebanon, Syria, and Israel offered a different set of treasures. Through ports like Byblos, Egypt engaged in a bustling maritime trade, acquiring the one ingredient so rare and so symbolically powerful that it was worth its weight in gold, lapis lazuli. This stunning blue stone, flecked with gold and pyrite, came from a single remote source in the mountains of modern-day Afghanistan. Its journey to Egypt was epic, passing through countless middlemen across Mesopotamia and the Levant before finally arriving via Levantine merchants. The cost was astronomical, making lapis lazuli an ultimate status symbol. To incorporate powdered lapis into a coal recipe was to literally paint the night sky onto one's eyelids, invoking the power of the heavens in the most direct way imaginable. The Egyptian demand for this stone was so immense that it became a cornerstone of Levantine Egyptian trade, with Egyptian gold, linen, and papyrus flowing out in exchange for these precious blue beads and raw stone blocks. A pharaoh might commission a special batch of coal, infused with lapis dust, solely for the most important religious ceremonies, a tangible display of his wealth and his unique connection to the celestial realm. This flow of exotic materials transformed coal into more than a personal cosmetic. It became a strategic commodity and a tool of international diplomacy. Finished coal, especially high-quality versions prepared in royal workshops, could itself be a valuable export or a prestigious gift between rulers. A chest containing alabaster jars of the finest coal, accompanied by golden applicators, would have been a fitting present from the Egyptian court to an allied king in the Levant or Mesopotamia. Such a gift was not merely a courtesy, it was a statement. It demonstrated Egypt's advanced technological and artistic prowess, its access to rare resources, and its participation in the sophisticated cultural practices that defined high civilization in the ancient world. In this sense, coal was a soft power asset. By gifting it, Egypt was sharing a piece of its divine protection and its aesthetic ideals, subtly influencing the courts of its neighbors and reinforcing its image as a center of wealth, wisdom, and spiritual authority. The economic implications rippled down to the smallest levels of society as well. While the state controlled the large-scale mining expeditions, the distribution and final sale of coal would have involved a bustling network of local traders, merchants, and market stallholders. In the crowded markets of Thebes or Memphis, a vendor might offer different grades of coal powder from the coarse, affordable grind for a farmer to the impeccably sifted, premium powder for a wealthy household. These merchants might also sell the raw ingredients, allowing individuals to custom mix their own recipes, or they could offer the finished paste in small, simple pots. This created a vibrant local economy around cosmetic production, providing livelihoods for grinders, potters, and sellers. The value chain of coal, therefore, stretched from the royal treasury funding desert expeditions to the humble market trader making a living, linking the might of the pharaoh to the daily life of the common citizen. It was a commodity that demonstrated how a single, culturally vital product could weave together geopolitics, long-distance trade, and local commerce, showing that the iconic Egyptian eye was, in many ways, a window into the entire economic soul of the civilization. This profound belief in coal's eternal necessity meant that death was not an end to its application, but rather a transition to its most critical use. The perilous journey through the Juat, the Egyptian underworld, was fraught with supernatural dangers, dark caverns, and deceptive spirits. Clear vision was not a luxury in this realm, it was an absolute requirement for survival. The deceased needed to see perfectly to read the magical spells from the Book of the Dead, to recognize friendly gods who could offer guidance, and to identify and evade the demonic creatures that lurked in the shadows, waiting to snare the unprepared soul. A person who entered the afterlife blind or visually impaired was considered tragically vulnerable, easily led astray or consumed. Therefore, the coal that had protected their physical eyes from the sun and infection in life was now entrusted with safeguarding their spiritual sight for eternity. It was the ultimate tool for navigating the landscape of the dead, ensuring the soul could find its way to the Hall of Judgment and, ultimately, to the blissful field of reeds. To guarantee this eternal protection, the living carefully interred complete cosmetic kits with their dead. These were not mere symbolic tokens, they were functional, practical sets designed for actual use in the next world. A typical funerary kit would include all the essentials we've discussed: a grinding pallet, one or more coal pots often still containing the dried residue of the paste, and several applicator sticks. The quality of these items directly reflected the social status of the deceased. A commoner might be buried with their simple, well-worn personal slate palette and a single pottery coal jar, objects that had seen a lifetime of daily use. For them, the funerary kit was an extension of their earthly life, ensuring continuity of their protective rituals. For the elite, however, these kits were often specially commissioned for the tomb, crafted from the most luxurious materials to serve the deceased in their exalted state in the afterlife. The act of placing these items in the tomb was a profound gesture of love and piety, a final duty of the family to equip their loved one for the most important journey they would ever undertake. The most breathtaking examples of these funerary provisions come from the undisturbed tomb of the boy King Tutankhamun. When Howard Carter first peered into the tomb in 1922, he found a collection of cosmetic items so lavish and precise that they provide an unparalleled window into the ritual life of a pharaoh. Among the golden shrines and jeweled daggers were objects of intimate, daily care. One of the most famous pieces is a beautifully carved wooden cosmetic chest. On its lid, a stunning scene inlaid with ivory, ebony, and gold shows the young king in his chariot, hunting ostriches and antelope. The artistry is magnificent, but the true magic lies inside. The chest was found to contain a suite of alabaster vessels, each with a specific purpose. There were small, elegant pots with lids, some still holding the remnants of black coal, while others contained traces of red and white pigments. This wasn't just a single color, this was a complete cosmetic palette for the afterlife, allowing the king to maintain his divine appearance for eternity. Alongside these pots were the tools of application. Archaeologists discovered Kohl sticks made of exquisite materials like deep blue glass and polished ebony, their tips still faintly stained with the dark pigment. There was also a remarkable mirror, its handle carved in the form of a papyrus column and its reflective surface made of polished silver, a metal associated with the moon and the bones of the gods. This object underscores the importance of sight and self-perception in the afterlife. The king would need to see himself to ensure his appearance was perfect and worthy before the deities he would meet. Perhaps the most poignant find was a simple, unguent jar made of alabaster, which was discovered with a tiny, withered wreath of flowers still draped around its neck, a final, tender offering from his grieving queen. These objects, from the grand chest to the humble wreath, show that the Egyptians saw no contradiction between immense wealth and deep personal affection. Protecting the king's spiritual vision was an act of both state importance and heartfelt love. The presence of these kits also reinforced the deceased's identity and social standing in the afterlife. In a civilization where status was divinely ordained, it was crucial to enter the next world with all the markers of one's earthly rank. A pharaoh like Tutankhamun needed his golden and alabaster coal pots to maintain his royal dignity before Osiris. A noblewoman would be buried with her ivory cosmetic spoons and faience jars to ensure she remained among the elite in the field of reeds. This practice created a powerful link between the idealized scenes of daily life painted on tomb walls showing the deceased being adorned and groomed, and the physical objects placed in the burial chamber. The wall painting promised the continuation of these activities, and the grave goods made it physically possible. The cosmetic kit was, therefore, a key that unlocked the idealized eternal life depicted in the tomb's art, transforming a two-dimensional image into a three-dimensional, functional reality for the soul. This belief in the objective reality of the afterlife, where the deceased would actively use these items, explains why we sometimes find cosmetic kits that show clear signs of wear. A palette might have a deep, smooth depression in its center from a lifetime of grinding. An applicator stick might be slightly warped or stained from years of use. These were not always new items made just for the tomb. They were often the personal, cherished possessions of the deceased, the very objects they had relied upon every day. This makes their inclusion in the tomb even more powerful. The individual was not being sent off with unfamiliar tools, but with their own trusted implements, the ones that had already proven their efficacy in providing protection and defining their identity. This continuity from life into death highlights how the Egyptians blurred the boundary between the two states. The afterlife was not a foreign, unknown realm, but a perfected, more glorious version of their earthly existence, where the daily ritual of applying coal remained as essential as breathing. So, we've uncovered their spiritual beliefs, their mining operations, and their meticulous preparation rituals, but how do we move from these historical accounts to truly understanding the chemical reality of what was in those little pots? This is where the story leaps from the world of archaeology into the realm of high-tech forensic science. For decades, we could only guess at the exact composition of coal based on written recipes and visual inspection. Now, with the advent of sophisticated laboratory techniques, we can ask the residues themselves to tell their story, and the answers they are giving are fundamentally reshaping our understanding of ancient Egyptian chemistry. The process begins with the tiniest of samples, a few milligrams of a black, crusty powder carefully scraped from the inside of a 3,000-year-old alabaster jar. This seemingly insignificant speck is then placed into machines that act as molecular time machines. One of the most powerful of these is a technique called X-ray diffraction. This technology doesn't just tell us what elements are present, it reveals the specific crystalline structure of the minerals. It's the difference between knowing a building block is present and having a complete blueprint of the crystal castle it forms. When X-rays are fired at the ancient Kohl sample, they bounce off the atomic layers within the minerals in a unique pattern, like a fingerprint. By reading this diffraction pattern, scientists can say with absolute certainty, this is galena or this is cerussite, identifying not just the substance, but its precise mineral form. This is where the first major surprise emerged. For a long time, it was assumed that the classic black coal was made primarily from one ingredient, galena. But X-ray diffraction and its partner in crime, scanning electron microscopy, revealed a far more complex picture. The coal was rarely a pure substance. Instead, it was a sophisticated blend of multiple lead-based compounds. Alongside the expected galena, scientists consistently found the presence of laurionite and phosgenite. This discovery was a game-changer. Why? Because galena is a naturally occurring mineral. You can mine it directly from the earth, but laurionite and phosgenite are different. They are synthetic. They do not occur in significant quantities in nature. Their presence in the coal pots is undeniable proof that the Egyptians were not just miners and grinders, they were chemical engineers. They were deliberately manufacturing these compounds through controlled chemical reactions, creating substances that nature provided only in trace amounts. This elevates their practice from simple cosmetic preparation to a form of intentional industrial synthesis. The question then becomes, how did they do it? How did ancient artisans, without modern lab equipment, produce these synthetic lead chlorides? The likely method reveals a breathtaking understanding of long-term chemical processes. Researchers theorize that they started with a common, bulk material, perhaps the dregs from a lead smelting operation or crushed galena itself. This material would be placed in a sealed ceramic pot along with a source of salt and moisture, maybe natron or even common seawater. This pot was then buried in a bed of fermenting organic matter, like dung or decaying plant material. For a period of several weeks or even months, a slow, controlled chemical reaction would take place. The heat from the fermentation, the moisture, and the chloride ions from the salt would gradually transform the common lead starting material into the prized, sparkling white crystals of laurionite and phosgenite. The artisans would then carefully extract these delicate, synthetic crystals and blend them with the deep black galena to create their final coal recipe. This was not a quick process, it was an exercise in patience and precise environmental control, a testament to an empirical mastery of chemistry that was passed down through generations of craftsmen. Another powerful technology used to dissect these ancient recipes is mass spectrometry. This technique is incredibly sensitive, capable of detecting and identifying the specific molecules present, even at the level of trace additives. It's like having a detective that can find a single specific person in a stadium full of people. Mass spectrometry has confirmed the presence of the various salts we discussed earlier, like sal ammoniac, and has also detected the chemical fingerprints of the binders, the plant gums and animal fats that held the powder together. But it has also uncovered even more exotic ingredients. In some samples, researchers have found trace elements of the rare earth element antimony, likely from the mineral stibnite. They found zinc and manganese oxides. These weren't accidental contaminants, they were intentional additions, each chosen to modify the color, texture, or perceived medicinal power of the final product. The Kohl was not a single, standardized recipe, but a customizable pharmacopoeia. A Kohl for a common eye irritation might have a different mineral balance than a Kohl intended for a high priest performing a specific ritual. The modern lab is revealing the ghost of this ancient customization, showing us that the Egyptians had a nuanced, almost prescription-based approach to their most famous cosmetic. All of this leads to the most profound question raised by this modern analysis: why would they go to such extraordinary lengths? Why deliberately synthesize complex lead compounds when they had plenty of naturally occurring galena? The answer appears to be a fusion of aesthetic and therapeutic genius. Galena on its own is a heavy, opaque black. When you blend it with the synthetic, white shimmering lauryonite and phosgenite, you change its physical properties. The mixture becomes lighter, less dense, and more adherent. It would have applied more smoothly and evenly, creating a finer, more lustrous line that was less likely to clump or flake off into the eye. But the benefits were almost certainly more than skin deep. We now understand that different lead compounds have different chemical reactivities. The synthetic chlorides, when they come into contact with the skin and tears, may have been even more effective at stimulating the body's production of nitric oxide, that key antimicrobial agent, than galena alone. The Egyptians, through centuries of observation, would have noticed that Kohl made with these special bright crystals was more effective at preventing and soothing eye infections. They didn't know the biochemistry, but they perfected the formula that produced the best clinical outcome. Their synthetic chemistry was driven by a desire for a superior product, one that looked better, felt better, and worked better. This modern scientific validation forces us to completely reconsider the intellectual landscape of ancient Egypt. We often hold a patronizing view of the past, imagining that their successes were happy accidents or the result of simple trial and error. The analysis of Kohl residues shatters this illusion. It reveals a culture capable of sustained, empirical inquiry. They observed a cause and effect. Certain mineral preparations led to healthier eyes, and they reverse-engineered a complex chemical process to consistently produce those beneficial minerals. They moved from simply using what nature provided to actively creating what nature did not, tailoring matter to suit their needs. This places them not as primitive cosmetic users, but as pioneers of materials science. The humble Kohl pot, when placed under the gaze of an X-ray diffractometer, becomes a testament to a lost world of innovation, a civilization that was manipulating the very building blocks of the physical world with a skill and intention that we are only now, with our most advanced machines, beginning to fully comprehend and appreciate. Of course, the story of Egyptian Kohl presents us with a profound and unsettling contradiction when viewed through our modern lens. Here we have a civilization that clearly prized this substance for its protective and healing properties, yet its primary ingredient, lead, is something we now recognize as a potent neurotoxin, especially dangerous to children and developing fetuses. So, how do we reconcile the Egyptians' apparent success with this substance against our certain knowledge of its dangers? This isn't just a historical curiosity. It's a gripping debate that forces us to question our assumptions about ancient knowledge and the complex interplay between culture and biology. On one side of this debate, the evidence seems straightforward and damning. We know with certainty that chronic, low-level lead exposure can cause a devastating cascade of health issues. It damages the nervous system, leading to cognitive decline, behavioral problems, and seizures. It can cause severe abdominal pain and anemia, and it is particularly catastrophic for the developing brains of children, resulting in permanent intellectual and developmental disabilities. From our 21st century perspective, The idea of deliberately applying a lead compound to the sensitive skin around the eyes, day after day, for an entire lifetime, seems like a recipe for a public health disaster. Yet, when we scour the archaeological and historical record for evidence of this impending disaster, it remains curiously elusive. There are no ancient medical papyri that describe symptoms we would clearly identify as lead poisoning on a mass scale. The artistic and literary depictions of Egyptian society do not show a populace visibly suffering from neurological disorders. If lead in coal was as devastating as our modern toxicology suggests, why doesn't the historical record scream with the evidence? This paradox has led scientists and historians to propose several fascinating theories that might explain this apparent immunity. The first and most compelling idea revolves around dosage and exposure. Think about the application. This wasn't a substance that was ingested or inhaled in large quantities. A person would apply a tiny, finely ground amount along the lash line. The total daily dose of lead absorbed through the skin in this specific area was likely minuscule, a slow, low-level trickle into the system rather than a toxic flood. This is a crucial distinction. The dose makes the poison, and it's possible that the Egyptian method of use kept them below the threshold for acute, observable poisoning, even if it resulted in a higher background level of lead in their bodies than what we would consider safe today. Furthermore, the specific mineralogy of the coal may have played a protective role. We've already discussed the brilliant synthesis of laurionite and phosgenite. These are lead chloride compounds, and their chemical behavior in the body is different from that of pure, metallic lead or lead acetate, which is highly soluble and bioavailable. Some research suggests that these chlorides are less readily absorbed through the skin than other lead forms. When combined with the other ingredients in the coal mixture, the salts, the oils, the other minerals, the overall bioavailability of the lead might have been further reduced. The Egyptians, through their empirical refinement of the recipe over centuries, may have accidentally stumbled upon a formulation that delivered the desired cosmetic and medicinal benefits while mitigating, though certainly not eliminating, the worst of the toxic effects. They were achieving their goals, infection control and spiritual protection, with a substance we know is dangerous, but their specific preparation and application method might have placed them in a narrow window of relative safety. Another provocative theory points to the possibility of genetic or epigenetic adaptations. Could the Egyptian population, after thousands of years of exposure to low levels of environmental lead from cosmetics, water pipes, and food containers, have developed a degree of tolerance? We see examples of this in other populations, such as groups with a long history of arsenic exposure in their water developing a higher metabolic tolerance for the poison. While we have no direct DNA evidence to prove this for ancient Egyptians, it is a plausible biological mechanism. Chronic, multi-generational exposure to a low-level toxin can exert evolutionary pressure, potentially selecting for individuals with genetic variations that allow for more efficient detoxification or excretion of the heavy metal. This wouldn't make them immune, but it could have meant that the same low dose that would cause obvious illness in an unexposed population might have produced only subtle, subclinical effects in them. Their bodies may have simply been better equipped to handle the constant, low-grade challenge. Ultimately, resolving this debate requires us to humbly accept the limits of our knowledge. The absence of evidence in the historical record is not definitive evidence of absence. The symptoms of low-level lead poisoning, such as reduced IQ, irritability, or minor developmental delays, are subtle. They wouldn't necessarily have been recognized as a specific disease syndrome in the ancient world. A child who is slightly less quick to learn might simply have been considered less bright, not the victim of a slow-acting poison. The abdominal pains could have been misattributed to parasites or bad food. It's entirely possible that Egyptian society was suffering the consequences of lead exposure, but those consequences were woven into the fabric of their general health and were simply invisible to them and to us from our distant vantage point. The truth likely lies in a nuanced middle ground. The Egyptians were not recklessly poisoning themselves into oblivion. Their sophisticated recipes and application methods probably protected them from the most acute dangers. Yet, it is almost certain that this lifelong, culturally mandated practice came with a hidden cost, a slight, imperceptible dimming of human potential, a price paid across generations for the sake of beauty, health, and divine favor, a trade-off they could never have known they were making. The iconic almond eyes of ancient Egypt did not exist in a vacuum. They were part of a vibrant conversation of cultures that stretched across the known world. As Egyptian power and prestige grew, so too did the influence of its customs, with Kohl becoming a coveted marker of civilization and sophistication. To the south, the Kingdom of Nubia, a longtime trading partner and sometimes rival of Egypt, provides one of the most direct examples of this cultural exchange. For centuries, Nubians and Egyptians interacted through trade, warfare, and diplomacy, and the use of eye paint was a practice they deeply shared. Archaeological finds in Nubian tombs reveal cosmetic palettes and kohl pots that are nearly identical to their Egyptian counterparts, showing a clear adoption of the technology and the aesthetic. Yet, the Nubians were not simply imitators. They infused the practice with their own cultural spirit. Their kohl pots often feature distinct artistic styles, incorporating local motifs and symbols. More importantly, while they used galena, they also had access to their own unique resources, perhaps experimenting with different mineral blends that reflected their own environment and spiritual beliefs. This illustrates a key dynamic. Egyptian kohl was a powerful cultural export, but neighboring societies adapted it, making it their own and ensuring its legacy would evolve beyond the Nile. This influence rippled across the Mediterranean to the budding civilizations of Greece and Rome, where Egyptian customs were often viewed with a mix of fascination and exotic allure. Initially, the Greeks saw the heavy use of eye makeup as somewhat foreign and excessive, associating it with Eastern decadence. However, as contact with Egypt intensified, particularly after Alexander the Great's conquest and the establishment of the Ptolemaic dynasty, Greek attitudes began to shift. They started to appreciate the practical benefits of eye protection in the bright Mediterranean sun, and the Egyptian association of kohl with the gods resonated with their own understanding of divine favor. The Romans, ever the pragmatists and magpies of culture, wholeheartedly adopted the practice, but typically for purely practical and cosmetic reasons. Roman women, in particular, used kohls, which they called atramentum, to darken their lashes and line their eyes, seeking to enhance their beauty. Roman medical writers like Galen even documented its use for eye ailments, acknowledging the Egyptian discovery of its therapeutic properties. However, the profound, all-encompassing spiritual framework that defined its use in Egypt, the direct connection to Horus and Ra, the essential role in the afterlife, never fully translated. For the Romans, kohl was largely a cosmetic. For the Egyptians, it had been a cosmic necessity. While Egypt's influence was profound, it is fascinating to discover that the instinct to adorn and protect the eyes was a global phenomenon, emerging independently in other great centers of ancient innovation. In Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, both men and women used kohl. Their versions were also typically based on galena, which they called Gu-1E2BLU, a word that is the root for our modern term, kohl. Cuneiform tablets from the region list eye preparations in their medical texts, showing a similar understanding of its protective qualities against infection and glare. Yet the symbolic meaning diverged. Mesopotamian art and literature don't assign the same dense, layered theological significance to the lined eye that we see in Egypt. There is no direct equivalent to the eye of Horus. Their use appears to have been more straightforwardly medicinal and aesthetic, a practical solution for a sun-scorched environment without the same intricate web of connections to royal power and the journey of the soul. Even more distant and more mysterious are the practices of the Indus Valley civilization. In the meticulously planned cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists have uncovered small, beautifully crafted pots made of steatite and seashells that strongly resemble coal containers. While the organic residues have long since decayed, the form and size of these vessels strongly suggest they held a cosmetic similar to coal. This points to a parallel development, an independent realization that the eyes were a focal point worthy of adornment and protection. Without deciphered written records from the Indus Valley, we can only speculate on the spiritual meaning they attached to the practice. Did they, like the Egyptians, see it as a shield against evil spirits? Was it a marker of status? The mere existence of these objects tells us that the human desire to enhance and protect the windows to the soul was a universal idea, bubbling up in separate river valleys across the ancient world. So, what truly set the Egyptian practice apart, making it so iconic and enduring? The difference lies not in the substance itself, but in the unparalleled system of meaning that surrounded it. Other cultures had the how, but Egypt perfected the why. It was the seamless and total integration of Kohl into every facet of existence, from the biological to the theological, that made it unique. In Mesopotamia, Kohl was a tool. In Rome, it was a cosmetic. In Egypt, it was a fundamental pillar of reality. It was science, serving as a preventative medicine that leveraged sophisticated chemistry long before it was understood. It was social order, worn by every class for shared yet stratified purposes, and most powerfully, it was religion, functioning as a wearable sacred symbol that provided divine protection in life and ensured safe passage in death. This holistic approach is what has cemented the image of the coal-lined eye in our collective imagination. It represents a civilization that refused to compartmentalize, that saw the universe as an interconnected whole where a simple black paste could hold the power to heal the body, elevate the spirit, and defy the darkness of the tomb. But how can we truly grasp the immense skill involved without feeling the weight of the grinding stone in our own hands or witnessing the slow transformation of rock into a velvety powder? This is where the fascinating field of experimental archaeology takes center stage, bridging the gap between theoretical knowledge and tangible experience. Researchers and skilled craftspeople are now stepping into the workshops of the ancients, setting aside modern equipment to recreate coal using only the tools, materials, and methods that would have been available thousands of years ago. Their goal is not just to produce a replica, but to understand the physical sensations, the time investment, and the nuanced decisions an Egyptian artisan had to make at every single step. This hands-on investigation reveals challenges and insights that no written description or artifact analysis could ever provide on its own. The process begins with the most fundamental element, the raw ore. An experimental archaeologist won't simply order purified galena online. They will source a rough chunk of lead ore directly from a mine, sometimes even from the same geological regions the Egyptians used. Holding that dense, metallic, and crystalline rock makes the scale of the task immediately apparent. The first challenge is the initial breaking. Using replicas of stone hammers and dolerite pounders, they quickly discover that reducing a solid lump of galena to a coarse gravel is a physically demanding, wrist-jarring endeavor. It requires precise, controlled strikes to prevent the valuable material from scattering in every direction. The sound is a loud, sharp cracking, a far cry from the quiet, rhythmic scraping of the fine grinding to come. This initial brute force stage alone can take hours, offering a visceral appreciation for the labor invested by the miners and the first processors, whose work provided the foundation for everything that followed. Once the ore is reduced to coarse sand, the true test of patience and skill begins, the grinding. The researcher sits with a replica slate pallet and a handheld muller and begins the slow, circular grinding process. This is where theory meets the reality of muscle fatigue. They find that maintaining a consistent, firm pressure while executing a perfect circular motion for an extended period is surprisingly difficult. The instinct is to press too hard, which actually creates more sharp, jagged grit rather than the desired fine powder. The correct technique involves a sustained, medium pressure and a patient, rhythmic motion. After what might feel like an hour of continuous work, they might stop to check their progress, only to find that the powder is still unacceptably coarse, feeling like fine sandpaper between their fingers. This single step, to achieve that perfectly safe, silken consistency, can take the better part of a day for just a few grams of material. This experimental grind reveals that the ancient artisans weren't just strong, they were incredibly disciplined, possessing a deep, tactile understanding of their materials that could only be earned through a lifetime of practice. Then comes the moment of truth, the sifting. Using a piece of finely woven linen, just as the Egyptians would have, the researcher carefully pours their hard-won powder onto the fabric. As they gently shake the frame, a cloud of the finest, most valuable pigment drifts through, collecting in a bowl below. What remains on top is a disheartening amount of gritty, unusable waste. This moment is a profound revelation. It demonstrates with startling clarity that a significant portion of the original ore, perhaps as much as half, was lost in the pursuit of perfection. This wasn't just a cosmetic loss, it was an economic one. Every grain of galena represented a dangerous mining expedition, a long desert journey, and immense human labor. The decision to discard so much material speaks volumes about the non-negotiable importance of safety and quality. The Egyptians were willing to sacrifice quantity to ensure that what went near the eye was absolutely flawless, a standard that modern experiments prove was both incredibly difficult and absolutely essential to achieve. The work of experimental chemists adds another, even more impressive layer to this investigation. Inspired by the discovery of synthetic minerals like laurionite in ancient pots, these scientists have attempted to replicate the long, slow chemical processes described in our earlier discussions. They mix crushed galena with salt and water in a clay jar, bury it in a bed of fermenting manure to provide a steady, low heat, and then they wait. For weeks, nothing seems to happen. It is a test of patience, mirroring the long-term planning of the ancient workshops. After a month or more, they carefully open the jar to find a breathtaking sight, a delicate garden of tiny, sparkling white crystals of laurionite has grown on the surface of the lead material. The process works, but it is fraught with uncertainty. Too much moisture, and the reaction fails, not enough heat, and nothing forms. These experiments prove that the Egyptians weren't just following a simple recipe, they were masters of controlling a chemical environment, maintaining the precise conditions for a slow-motion transformation over a long period. This was not a quick craft, it was a form of alchemical farming, requiring a deep, generational knowledge of how to manipulate time and temperature. Perhaps the most humbling realization from these recreations is the sheer body of tacit knowledge that is never written down. An experimental archaeologist can follow all the steps correctly, crushing, grinding, sifting, mixing, and still end up with an inferior product. They learn through failure that the type of oil or fat used as a binder drastically changes the final texture and application. A fat that is too greasy creates a smudgy line. A gum that is too thick makes the paste clumpy, they discover that the ideal binder might be a specific mix of castor oil and a tiny amount of beeswax, a recipe perfected through centuries of trial and error. This kind of nuanced, practical knowledge was likely passed from a master artisan to an apprentice through demonstration and touch, not through any written manual. The experimental process makes it clear that the written recipes we find in papyri are just the skeleton of the practice, the muscle and sinew of the craft, the feel of the perfect grind, the smell of the right consistency were embedded in the hands and minds of the craftspeople themselves, a living library of technique that was lost for millennia and is only now being painstakingly rediscovered. This remarkable journey from the tombs of pharaohs brings us to a fascinating question: what happened to this ancient practice? Did it vanish with the last hieroglyph, or does its story continue? The answer lies in the bustling markets of modern Cairo, the villages of the Nile Delta, and households across the Middle East and South Asia, where the legacy of Kohl is very much alive. The iconic substance never truly disappeared. Instead, it underwent a profound transformation, evolving from a state-sponsored industry entwined with divine kingship into a resilient thread of folk tradition, personal piety, and cultural memory. Today, it is known by its Arabic name, Kohl, or in regions like Pakistan and India as surma. While the sleek packaging of modern eyeliners fills department stores, the simple, timeless Kohl pot still holds a powerful, enduring appeal for millions. Its continued use is a testament to a deep-seated cultural belief system that has weathered centuries of change, adapting while holding fast to its core identity as a protector and a beautifier. The most immediate shift from ancient to modern times is in the primary ingredient itself. The sophisticated, state-controlled mining of galena and the intentional synthesis of laurionite have largely given way to more accessible materials. While traditional galena-based coal still exists, a far more common base in contemporary recipes is a fine, sooty powder made from burning a specific substance and collecting the ash. A prevalent traditional method involves burning salem or ithmid, often identified as antimony sulfide or other aromatic woods, and then carefully collecting the pure, black carbon residue. This charcoal-like powder is then mixed with oils, most commonly pure olive oil or almond oil, to create a smooth, black paste. In other recipes, you might find finely powdered almond shells or even camphor added to the mix, each ingredient chosen for its perceived cooling or medicinal properties. This evolution in formulation speaks to a practical adaptation. The complex supply chains of the pharaohs are gone, replaced by local, sustainable materials that still deliver the iconic dark color and are believed to retain the protective essence of the original. So, why does this ancient practice persist in the 21st century? The reasons are a powerful echo of the past, now framed within a modern cultural and religious context. The perceived medicinal benefits remain a primary driver, a folk wisdom passed down through generations. Grandmothers and mothers in many communities still apply a tiny dot of kohl to a baby's eyelid or forehead shortly after birth, believing it strengthens the child's eyesight from the very start and protects them from the dreaded evil eye, that same malevolent glare the ancient Egyptians feared, now known as Ayn al-Hasad in Arabic. For older children and adults, kohl is a go-to remedy for eye infections, irritation, or simply to cool and soothe the eyes from the harsh glare of the sun. This isn't just superstition, it's a deeply held empirical belief, supported by centuries of anecdotal evidence within these communities. The antibacterial properties of the oils and the astringent quality of certain additives provide a tangible, physical sensation of relief that reinforces the tradition's validity for its users. Alongside these health beliefs, the practice is now firmly wrapped in the fabric of Islamic tradition, which provided a new spiritual framework for an old custom. There are several well-known hadiths or sayings of the Prophet Muhammad that recommend the use of kohl. One particularly famous hadith mentions ithmid as the best form of kohl, as it helps the eyes to see clearly and makes the eyelashes grow. Because of this religious endorsement, applying kohl, especially before sleep, is considered a sunnah, a commendable practice that follows the Prophet's example. This religious sanction did not replace the ancient protective function, it seamlessly absorbed and recontextualized it. The kohl is still a shield, but now it is also an act of piety, a way to gain spiritual blessings while caring for one's body. This fusion of ancient belief and religious faith has given kohl a powerful resilience, ensuring its place in daily routines from North Africa to the Indian subcontinent. The social and aesthetic dimensions of kohl have also transformed. In ancient Egypt, its use was near universal across genders and classes. Today, its application is more nuanced. In many parts of the Middle East and South Asia, you will still see men, particularly in more traditional or rural settings, wearing kohl. For them, it often retains its practical and protective qualities, a mark of traditional masculinity linked to health and piety. However, its most visible modern expression is undoubtedly as a cosmetic for women. The dramatic, almond-shaped lines of ancient art have evolved into a variety of stylish applications, from a thin, precise line along the waterline to a smudged, smoky effect that is strikingly contemporary. It is a staple of bridal makeup across these regions, symbolizing not just beauty, but also protection for the bride as she enters a new phase of life. The application remains a ritual of intimacy and care, often shared between mothers and daughters, or among friends, continuing that ancient social bond forged around the cosmetic pot. Yet, this enduring tradition now faces a formidable challenge: the scrutiny of modern science and regulation. The very thing that made ancient kohl so effective, its mineral content, is now the source of grave concern. Health organizations like the World Health Organization and various national food and drug administrations have issued stark warnings about the dangers of lead poisoning from non-compliant kohl. The issue is not with the plant-based or carbon-based pastes, but with products that are improperly sourced or adulterated. Alarmingly, studies have found that some kohl samples, even those sold in reputable markets, contain dangerously high levels of lead, mercury, arsenic, and other toxic heavy metals. This creates a heartbreaking conflict between cherished cultural practice and undeniable medical evidence. A parent following a generations-old tradition to protect their infant may inadvertently be exposing them to a neurotoxin that can cause irreversible developmental damage. This has sparked a vital and ongoing dialogue within these communities, pitting deep-seated cultural trust against the imperative of modern child safety. In response to this crisis, a new market has emerged for safer, regulated alternatives. Many companies now produce lead-free kohl or surma, which use activated charcoal, plant-based oils, and other natural colorants to mimic the appearance of traditional kohl without the toxic risks. These products are a direct attempt to preserve the cultural form while eliminating the dangerous substance. Their adoption, however, is uneven. For some, especially in urban, educated populations, these safe alternatives are an obvious choice. For others, particularly in rural areas where tradition holds greater sway and access to regulated goods is limited, the distrust of modern, commercial products can be strong. The authentic, locally prepared kohl is often seen as more potent and trustworthy, a belief that modern packaging and safety certifications have yet to fully overcome. This tension highlights the complex journey of an ancient artifact into the modern globalized world, where it must be re-evaluated, re-engineered, and sometimes reluctantly abandoned for the sake of health. The story of Kohl's evolution is a powerful lesson in cultural endurance. It demonstrates how a practice can shed its original political and religious structures, the pharaohs, the temple cults of Horus and Ra, and find a new life embedded in different institutions, namely family wisdom and Islamic tradition. The central idea that a simple black line can shield a person from both unseen malevolence and physical ailment has proven to be incredibly durable. It has moved from the domain of royal artisans to the hands of grandmothers, from stone palettes to small plastic or glass bottles, and from the banks of the Nile to a global diaspora. Its persistence is a quiet rebellion against the homogenizing force of globalization, a claim that ancient knowledge still has a place in the modern home. When a mother in a Cairo apartment or a village in Pakistan reaches for her Kohl pot, she is, whether she knows it or not, participating in a ritual that connects her directly to a woman grinding galena on a slate palette under the Egyptian sun 3,000 years ago. She is maintaining a thread of continuity that speaks to a universal, timeless human desire to protect what is precious, to enhance what is beautiful, and to find a little bit of magic in the routines of daily life. That mesmerizing almond-eyed gaze, perfected by the ancient Egyptians, refused to be buried in the sand. It has enjoyed an eternal renaissance, traveling across centuries and continents to become one of the most powerful and enduring beauty archetypes in human history. This journey begins with a single, iconic face, Nefertiti. The painted limestone bust of the queen, discovered in Amarna, is more than a masterpiece of ancient art. It is the definitive blueprint for the Kohl-lined eye. Her portrait is a study in sublime geometry. The elegant arch of the brows, the confident sweep of the dark liner extending towards her temples, and the perfectly sculpted lids create a look that is at once regal, serene, and utterly formidable. Nefertiti's face, even in its state of serene composure, communicates immense power and divine authority. This single artifact, now housed in a Berlin museum, has done more to shape our modern visual conception of ancient Egyptian beauty than perhaps any other single object. It established a standard of elegance that was both timeless and instantly recognizable, a look that would captivate the Western imagination for generations to come. Centuries later, the Western world experienced a series of Egyptomania crazes, each one reigniting fascination with this iconic aesthetic. The most explosive of these was undoubtedly triggered by the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. As newspapers around the globe published photographs of the golden treasures, a wave of Egyptian-inspired design swept through the Art Deco movement. Suddenly, the sleek, geometric lines of pyramids, lotus flowers, and yes, the dramatic kohl-rimmed eyes were appearing on everything from skyscraper architecture to jewelry, furniture, and evening gowns. This was not a scholarly attempt at historical accuracy, but a romantic reinterpretation. Designers took the ancient forms and streamlined them for the modern age, creating a chic, exotic glamour that captivated high society. The Kohl line was no longer just an archaeological curiosity. It was a symbol of the Jazz Age's fascination with the mysterious, the opulent, and the technologically ancient. This romanticization reached its cinematic zenith with Hollywood's portrayal of Cleopatra. While many actresses have taken on the role, Elizabeth Taylor's depiction in the 1963 epic became the definitive version for millions. The film's makeup artists, working under the legendary Alberto de Rossi, created a look that was pure theatrical genius. They took the basic Egyptian principle and amplified it for the Technicolor screen, crafting a winged liner of such dramatic, almost architectural precision that it became a character in itself. Taylor's eyes, outlined in a bold, swooping curve of the deepest black and adorned with gilded lids and false lashes, were a spectacle of power and seduction. This was not the subtle, spiritual Kohl of a priest. This was the weaponized glamour of a queen who could command empires with a glance. The film's massive publicity campaign ensured that this hyper-stylized Cleopatra eye was seared into the global consciousness, creating a beauty standard that countless women rushed to emulate. It cemented the idea that a strong, dramatic eye was the ultimate accessory of a powerful, enigmatic woman. This legacy did not fade with the closing credits. It seamlessly integrated into the DNA of modern fashion and beauty. The catwalk has repeatedly turned to the Egyptian eye for inspiration, reinterpreting it for each new generation. In the 1960s, designers like Pierre Cardin and Paco Rabanne echoed the look with graphic, geometric designs that mirrored the bold eyeliner trends of the time. Decades later, John Galliano, during his tenure at Dior, presented extravagant collections that directly referenced Egyptian mythology, with models adorned in elaborate, Nefertiti-inspired headdresses and eyes painted with lapis lazuli blue and metallic gold, echoing the sacred palettes of the pharaohs. More recently, designers at houses like Chanel and Dolce & Gabbana have sent models down the runway with heavily kohled, smoky eyes, proving the look's perpetual resonance. The fashion world understands the innate power of this shape. It elongates the eye, adds intensity to the gaze, and creates an aura of mystique that is as potent on a modern runway as it was in a sun-baked temple. Today, this ancient aesthetic is so deeply woven into our beauty lexicon that we often use it without a second thought to its origins. The cat eye, or winged eyeliner that millions of people apply every morning, is the direct, living descendant of Egyptian Kohl. While the tools have evolved from sharpened reeds to felt-tip liquid liners and the formulas from galena paste to smudge-proof gels, the fundamental goal remains identical: to define, elongate, and dramatize the shape of the eye. Makeup artists continually reinvent this classic, playing with thickness, color, and the sharpness of the flick. A sharp, minimalist wing conveys a modern, polished edge, while a smudged, smoky version evokes a rock and roll cool. The recent trend of graphic liner, which uses bold colors and unconventional shapes to create artistic statements around the eyes, is merely the latest evolution of this ancient practice. It demonstrates our enduring desire to use the face as a canvas and the eye as the focal point of that expression, a principle the Egyptians mastered millennia ago. What is it about this specific aesthetic that gives it such incredible staying power? The answer lies in its unique fusion of symbolism and universal flattery. On a symbolic level, the strong, lined eye has consistently been associated with power, intelligence, and mystique. From the divine protection of Horus to the political cunning of Cleopatra and the fierce independence of 20th-century screen sirens, this look has always been worn by figures who command attention. It frames the windows to the soul, making the wearer's gaze more penetrating and memorable. On a purely physiological level, the shape is universally flattering. The upward sweep of the wing creates an optical illusion that lifts and widens the eyes, making the wearer appear more awake, alert, and youthful. This powerful combination of meaning and aesthetics is irresistible. It allows anyone who wears it to tap into that ancient lineage of strength and divinity, to feel a connection to an artistic tradition that stretches back to the very dawn of civilization, all while simply enhancing their own natural features in a beautifully dramatic way. Yet, for all its documented history and scientific validation, the story of Egyptian Kohl is surrounded by a thick fog of modern myths and well-intentioned misunderstandings. One of the most persistent of these misconceptions is the belief that this iconic cosmetic was simply made from soot or charcoal. It's an easy assumption to make. After all, both substances are black and readily available. But this idea completely misses the technological and cultural sophistication of the actual practice. The ancient Egyptians had access to a stunning array of minerals and possessed the knowledge to process them. They weren't just sweeping up ash from a fire, they were running state-sponsored mining expeditions into the desert to extract specific ores like galena and malachite. Using simple soot would have been a profound step backwards for them. Soot is amorphous, messy, and lacks the lustrous, metallic sheen that characterized high-quality coal. More importantly, soot has none of the medicinal or chemical properties that made coal so effective. It doesn't contain the lead salts that stimulated the immune system, nor could it be blended with synthetic minerals like laureanite. The choice of galena was deliberate and multi-functional. To suggest they used charcoal is to ignore the vast industrial and chemical infrastructure they built around this essential substance, reducing a complex, state-level industry to the level of a campfire residue. Another widespread fiction revolves around its primary purpose. How many times have you heard or read that the Egyptians wore coal to reduce the sun's glare, much like a modern athlete smears black grease under their eyes? This theory seems logical on the surface. Egypt is a sunny country, and a dark line might cut glare. However, this is a classic case of applying a modern, practical explanation to an ancient, holistic worldview. While it's true that the dark pigment may have offered a minor, incidental reduction in glare, this was never its primary function. If that were the main goal, why did they apply it so heavily and in such a specific, ritualized shape that extended far beyond the lash line? Why did they go to the immense trouble of mining, grinding, and chemically synthesizing lead compounds when simple mud or charcoal would have served the same glare-reducing purpose? The evidence points overwhelmingly to a different conclusion. The driving forces were medicinal and spiritual. The coal was a preventative medicine, a carefully formulated antibacterial and immune-stimulating paste applied to one of the body's most vulnerable areas. And symbolically, it was the Eye of Horus, a divine shield against chaotic forces. The sun glare theory is a comfortable, reductionist explanation for a practice that was, in reality, deeply enmeshed in their entire understanding of health, divinity, and cosmic order. A related and equally misleading myth is the notion that coal was a universal, one-size-fits-all product. This overlooks the incredible diversity and customization evident in the archaeological record. We find coal pots with residues of different colors, textures, and chemical compositions. A commoner's coal, designed for basic daily protection, might have been a straightforward galena and fat mixture. But a priest's coal, intended for a specific ceremony, could have been a complex blend incorporating powdered lapis lazuli for its celestial connection, sacred herbs for their aromatic and magical properties, and specific salts known for their healing effects. There wasn't a single Egyptian coal recipe any more than there is a single modern moisturizer. The recipes were tailored to the user's status, wealth, and immediate needs. Think of the difference between an over-the-counter hand cream and a prescription-strength dermatological treatment. Both are creams, but their formulations and purposes are worlds apart. The Egyptians understood this intuitively. Their coal could be a simple prophylactic, a potent medicine, or a consecrated ritual object, depending on the intention behind its creation and use. Perhaps the most dangerous modern myth is the romanticized idea that we should replicate ancient Egyptian coal recipes today using natural materials. This well-meaning but misguided impulse, often found in natural living circles, fails to account for the one critical element we now understand, the toxicity of lead. While the Egyptians likely mitigated the risks through their specific preparation and minimal application, they were still using a neurotoxin. We now have incontrovertible evidence of the severe and permanent damage lead exposure can cause, especially in children. To intentionally create and apply a lead-based paste today, based on an incomplete understanding of an ancient practice, is not a return to a pure tradition. It is a serious health hazard. The true lesson from Egyptian Kohl is not that we should use their exact ingredients, but that we should emulate their holistic approach to wellness, one that combined practical science with an understanding of psychological and spiritual needs. We can honor their innovation by using safe, modern cosmetics that offer the same aesthetic effect, while leaving the dangerous chemistry in the past where it belongs. Dispelling these myths is not just an academic exercise, it allows us to see the ancient Egyptians with the respect and awe they deserve. When we imagine them grinding soot from a fire, we see a primitive people. But when we understand the reality that they were master chemists who synthesized specific compounds, savvy physicians who developed a functional antibiotic paste, and profound theologians who painted their connection to the gods directly onto their skin, we see a civilization of staggering sophistication. The real story of Kohl is far more fascinating than any simplified fiction. It's a story that challenges our own compartmentalized view of the world, where science, medicine, and spirituality are often kept in separate boxes. For the Egyptians, these were all part of a single, seamless reality, and a simple pot of black powder was the perfect vessel for all of them. By letting go of the comfortable myths, we can finally appreciate the true, brilliant complexity of a people who turned everyday life into an act of cosmic significance. Even with all our advanced technology and deep research, the story of Egyptian Kohl is not a closed book. Significant, tantalizing mysteries remain, reminding us that for all we have uncovered, there are still profound gaps in our understanding. One of the most compelling questions is the sheer, almost obsessive complexity of the recipes. We can understand adding 1 or 2 active ingredients, but why create such intricate blends of multiple lead compounds, exotic salts, crushed gemstones, and sacred herbs? Was this layered complexity simply the result of centuries of gradual, empirical addition, where every successful outcome led to another ingredient being incorporated? Or does it point to a much deeper, more sophisticated theoretical framework that has been completely lost to time? Perhaps the Egyptians possessed a holistic concept of medicine and magic where each ingredient was not just for a single purpose, but played a specific role in a complex interaction, creating a synergistic effect that was greater than the sum of its parts. We can analyze the chemical components, but we may never grasp the underlying philosophy that guided their combinations, a system of knowledge where the spiritual property of a substance was considered as vital as its physical effect. This leads directly to another enduring enigma, the identity of the master craftsmen behind the most potent and sacred Kohl. Were there revered, almost alchemical experts, the equivalent of master perfumers or elite chemists, who guarded secret formulas passed down through generations within specific families or temple workshops? It seems unlikely that such advanced synthesis and precise recipes were common knowledge. The creation of lauryonite through a months-long, carefully controlled process strongly suggests the existence of a specialized, secretive guild. These individuals would have been more than just artisans. They would have been seen as possessors of divine knowledge, the only ones trusted to prepare the Kohl for the pharaoh's sacred eyes or for the rituals performed before the gods. Their workshops would have been the ancient world's equivalent of high-security laboratories, and their recipes, perhaps recorded on fragile papyrus scrolls or memorized through oral tradition, would have been among their most valuable and protected possessions. The loss of their specific identities and the details of their training is a profound cultural loss, leaving us to wonder about the brilliant minds who first discovered how to transform desert rock into a substance of both science and spirit. The ghost of this lost knowledge makes the search for a definitive cosmetic papyrus one of the great dreams of Egyptology. We have medical texts like the Ebers Papyrus that include Kohl recipes, but what if an entire scroll, dedicated solely to the art and science of cosmetics, is still out there, waiting to be discovered in an unexplored tomb or a forgotten corner of a museum basement. Such a document would be a treasure beyond measure. It wouldn't just list recipes, it would detail the specific rituals for gathering ingredients, the incantations to be spoken during grinding, the precise measurements for different social classes or different deities, and the philosophical principles that guided the entire practice. It could name the master perfumers and describe the hierarchy of their craft. The potential discovery of such a text is a powerful motivator for ongoing research, a reminder that our current understanding is built on a fragmented record. Every new archaeological season holds the potential for a find that could completely rewrite what we know about this daily ritual, transforming our view from educated reconstruction to direct testimony from the ancient artisans themselves. Perhaps the most humbling mystery is that our most advanced scientific tools can tell us what was in the coal pots, but they cannot tell us why with absolute certainty. We can detect lead, laurionite, and salts, and we can theorize about nitric oxide production, but we cannot prove this biochemical mechanism was the intended outcome. It is the most plausible explanation that fits the evidence, but it remains a theory. Is it possible the Egyptians understood this process on some level we haven't yet recognized, or was their success truly a magnificent accident, a case of cultural evolution where the recipes that produced the healthiest outcomes were the ones that survived and were refined over millennia? This question strikes at the heart of how we interpret the past. Do we see the ancient Egyptians as proto-scientists, consciously experimenting and refining, or as brilliant empiricists, perfectly attuned to cause and effect without needing to know the underlying mechanics? The Kohl residues challenge our categories, forcing us to acknowledge that their why was likely a seamless blend of what we would separate into science, religion, and magic. Ultimately, these unanswered questions are not a failure of research, but a gift. They keep the story of ancient Egypt alive and dynamic, resisting a simple, final conclusion. They remind us that this civilization, for all its monumental stability, was a place of innovation, secret knowledge, and deep intellectual curiosity. The silent, coal-lined eyes staring back at us from statues and sarcophagi still hold their secrets close. They invite us to continue looking, questioning, and investigating, ensuring that the legacy of Egyptian coal is not just a tale of a finished past, but an ongoing dialogue between their world and ours, a conversation that continues to reveal new layers of meaning and ingenuity with every passing discovery. So we arrive at the end of our exploration, having traced the incredible journey of a substance that is so much more than simple makeup. It began as a raw, crystalline ore, hewn from the sun-baked rock of the eastern desert by the hands of determined miners. That rugged stone then underwent a profound transformation, ground with patient skill on a slate pallet into a powder as fine as silk, sifted to remove any hint of imperfection. But the Egyptians didn't stop there. In a stunning leap of chemical genius, they learned to bury their mixtures, guiding slow reactions in sealed jars to cultivate synthetic crystals like laurionite, intentionally engineering matter to serve their needs. This refined powder was then blended with medicinal salts to fight infection, with binding oils for smooth application, and with the crushed essence of sacred gemstones and herbs to weave a tapestry of spiritual protection. The final product was stored in containers that were themselves amulets, carved from alabaster or brilliant faience, before being applied with a steady hand to create one of the most iconic looks in human history. This entire process reveals a civilization whose understanding of the world was beautifully and brilliantly holistic. They made no firm distinction between the pharmacy and the temple, between the laboratory and the sanctuary. In their view, a substance that could stimulate the body's production of nitric oxide to fight bacteria, was, by its very nature, also capable of warding off the evil eye. The science and the magic were two sides of the same coin, both representing the imposition of order mat upon the chaos of disease and malevolent spirits. Their Kohl was a testament to this unified worldview, a single solution to a multitude of challenges, both seen and unseen. It was preventative medicine, a functional cosmetic, a marker of social status, and a direct conduit to the divine, all contained within a simple pot of black paste. This multifaceted approach challenges our modern, compartmentalized thinking, inviting us to consider a time when every action, no matter how mundane, was potentially filled with cosmic significance. Now, when you see those dramatic, almond-shaped eyes staring back from a museum display or a history book, you can see beyond the elegant artistry. You can perceive the depth of knowledge they represent. You are looking at the result of state-sponsored mining expeditions, of masterful grinding techniques, of intentional chemical synthesis, and of a spiritual belief system that connected every individual to the gods. That coal-lined gaze is a window into a civilization of astonishing sophistication, a people who transformed the raw materials of their earth into a tool for survival, a statement of identity, and a key to eternal life. It is a look that has captivated us for millennia, not just for its beauty, but for the profound story of human ingenuity it tells. I want to leave you with a final image. Picture an ancient Egyptian artisan at the end of their day, the sun setting over the Nile. They lift a polished bronze mirror, and in its dim reflection, they see their own face, framed by the very coal they helped to create. Their eyes, so strikingly defined, look out not just across the room, but across the vast expanse of time, directly toward us. In that gaze, there is protection, there is knowledge, and there is an unbroken connection to a world where every detail mattered. We've unraveled so many of their secrets, from the chemistry of their recipes to the symbolism of their rituals, but the fascination is endless. I'm so curious to know what part of this ancient mystery resonates most deeply with you. Was it the advanced chemical processes they mastered, the profound spiritual beliefs that empowered a simple cosmetic, or perhaps the stunning artifacts, like Tutankhamun's alabaster jars, that make this history feel so immediate? Let me know in the comments below what aspect of the Egyptian Kohl story you find most captivating.